Paranormal M viewers. Have you been having trouble sleeping lately? Don't worry, let the eerie stories on this channel help you unwind and drift off to sleep. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. Also, thank you so much for sending in so many mysterious experiences. Now, without further ado, get cozy in bed, put on your headphones, and let's get started. Let me tell you about this old schoolhouse out in a small Kansas town called Mayfield. It had been in our family for years, and even though it belonged to us, it never really felt like ours. It felt like it belonged to something older. The place was falling apart in that beautiful, unsettling way old buildings do. The brick was cracked, the windows were so dusty you could barely see through them, and the floors groaned every time you took a step. In daylight, it just looked abandoned. But at night, it felt alive in a way I still can't fully explain. One hot afternoon, my two sisters and I were wandering through the building, poking around like we always did, half curious and half trying to scare each other. We ended up in the old library, where the shelves were bowed with books nobody had touched in ages. That's where we found it, a diary. It was small and worn, with a faded blue cover and pages gone soft and yellow with time. Inside, it belonged to a girl named Clara, a student who had gone to school there long before we were ever born. And when we started reading, it didn't feel like just some old notebook. It felt personal. Her words were full of the kinds of things only a young girl would write down. Little worries, hopes, private thoughts, things she probably never imagined anyone else would read. That night, we couldn't stop thinking about it, so we went back. We climbed the narrow stairs to the upstairs office, carrying the diary with us. I still remember how loud those steps sounded under our feet. The moon was coming through the broken glass, laying these pale streaks across the floorboards. We sat down together in a circle with the diary between us, and I guess, in our own foolish way, we were trying to feel close to the girl who had written it, trying to reach back through time. The strange part is, the night had been completely still. Heavy summer air, no wind at all. But while we were sitting there talking softly, wondering about Clara and what her life had been like, this sudden rush of cold air swept through the room. Not just a draft, I mean a real, sharp gust. It passed right between me and my youngest sister, and it was so cold it made us both jump. It felt like something had moved through us, something unseen, but very much there. One second the room was warm, and the next it felt like all the heat had been pulled out of it. I can still remember that chill on my face. We were scared, of course, but we stayed until we finally decided we'd had enough. Before we left, we hid the diary under a loose wooden step near the office. It seemed like the perfect hiding place, tucked where no one would think to look. We closed it up and went home, fully expecting it to be there when we came back. But it wasn't. When we returned, the whole building felt quiet in a different way. Too quiet. We went straight to the step, pulled it open, and the diary was gone. Just gone. No dust disturbed anywhere else, no explanation, nothing left behind. It was as if Clara had come back for it herself and taken her words with her. After that, the schoolhouse never felt the same to me. It seemed colder, harsher. The silence in those rooms felt heavier, like the place was listening. People around there still talk about it. Some say Clara's spirit never left, that she still lingers in that upstairs office, searching for the diary and brushing past anyone who stays there too long after dark. Others think the building itself kept the secret, that some things buried in the past aren't meant to be carried into the present. All I know is this: we found that diary, we read her words, and then one night it vanished without a trace. This happened around the fall of 2010, when I was in my junior year at Glenville State in West Virginia. It's a university now, but back then it was still Glenville State College. I grew up about an hour away, so I never really felt like I'd gone very far from home. And if you know that area, you know there are already plenty of ghost stories floating around. The whole campus had that reputation too. People always said it was haunted, and honestly, after everything I experienced there, I believed it. Even the dorm I lived in felt off sometimes. And right there on campus, there was even an old cemetery, which only added to the atmosphere. So when a paranormal group came in right before Halloween to do ghost tours and investigations, of course a few of us decided to go. At the time, I was on the cheer team. 4 of us signed up together, which worked out perfectly because everyone had to have a buddy. So I paired up with one of my teammates, and the other 2 paired up together. That night, we started at Clark Hall, which sits up on the hill at the top of campus. They split everyone into groups, and all 4 of us ended up together in the same one. We went in through the main entrance, and the investigators made a big point of telling us the power had been shut off at the breaker. The windows were closed, the building was still, and there wasn't even a hint of airflow anywhere. No lights, no drafts, no background noise, nothing. Just silence. And that's when things started to get strange. My buddy and I were walking right behind our other 2 teammates. One of them had really bright blonde hair, so she was easy to spot even in the dark. At some point, while we were heading toward the 2nd floor, we got separated from them. To this day, I still can't explain exactly how it happened. My friend and I had our arms locked the whole time, so it wasn't like we drifted apart. But somehow, suddenly, it was just the 2 of us. We realized it when we were standing in a hallway and another group nearby had started doing EVP recordings. We didn't want to interrupt them, so we decided to quietly backtrack and find our friends. We walked down the hall toward this old, heavy wooden door. It had that dark, antique look to it, with a little pane of glass at the top, and I remember so clearly thinking how still everything was. No wind, no moving air, nothing at all. Then that door slammed. Not slowly, not like it drifted shut. It flew toward us and slammed hard, right in front of us, and then started rattling on its own. I mean, violently rattling. My friend and I were gripping each other so hard it probably hurt. It felt like something straight out of a horror movie, except it wasn't a movie. We were standing there in it, and I don't know why, but I just spoke out loud. I said, "Please let us through. We're only trying to get back to our group." The second I said that, the rattling stopped. Just stopped. And then I was able to open the door. We went through as fast as we could, and somehow our group was right down the hall. We caught back up with our teammates, and what really got me was that none of them had heard the slam. Not one of them. They'd been wondering where we went, but they never heard that door crash shut the way we did. They were busy taking photos, hoping to catch something in the still shots. But the night still wasn't over. My ankle was badly hurt. One of my teammates, the flyer I usually based for in cheer, ended up helping carry me back. I remember thinking there was no way she could manage that, but she absolutely did. All 4 of us made it back to the dorms together. Later, I found out I had fractured that same ankle again. I'd broken it years earlier when I was running track, so this was a refracture. It's been a long time now, but I still think about that night. And looking back, what stays with me the most is the feeling at that door. I'm sensitive to energy, and what I felt there didn't seem random. It felt like an older woman, frustrated, almost offended, like she thought we were trying to wander off or disrespect the space. And that door slamming in our faces felt like her way of saying, "No, go back." Whatever it was, I've never forgotten it. And honestly, I don't think I ever will. So, this happened maybe a couple of years after that whole boy in the bush chapter of my life. By then, I'd left the country and found myself in Sydney, somehow landing a job as a clerk in this old department store. How I got the job is a story for another day, honestly. But I was young, a bit green, and pretty pleased with myself. The building itself was something else. It dated back to the 1800s, all Gothic stonework and dramatic features, with this big clock and glass domes that gave it a real grandeur. It sat not far from Glebe, and anyone who knows Sydney could probably guess the place. I'd managed to get a tiny flat in Chippendale for about $55 a week, which tells you exactly what year we're talking about. Now, where I worked was hardly glamorous. Our little office was tucked away, and so small it felt more like a cupboard than a proper workplace. There were 2 computers jammed in there, and a row of machines that rattled out price tickets all day. Above us were these old, unused offices, and beyond them, an abandoned ballroom. I didn't think much of it at first. It was just an old building, that's all. I shared the office with a young woman I'll call Linda. Right from my first week, though, the place felt off. One afternoon, I was standing by the ticket machines when, out of the corner of my eye, I noticed a man in overalls just watching me. Hands in his pockets, still as anything. I turned straight away to look properly, and he was gone. Just gone. No footsteps, no door, nothing. After that, I kept catching glimpses of him. It happened often enough that I ended up giving him a name, Chaz. It sounds ridiculous now, but that somehow made it less unsettling. And it wasn't just him. We'd hear footsteps upstairs in those empty offices. Phones ringing, even though there weren't any phones connected up there. Sometimes there was the smell of cigars drifting through, which made no sense at all because the whole area was non-smoking. And every now and then, there'd be faint voices, or old-fashioned music, like something floating in from another time. I asked Linda about it, half hoping she'd laugh and tell me I was imagining things. But she'd heard it too. Same sounds, same weirdness. Once she admitted that, it all felt a lot less explainable and a lot more unsettling. Then one evening, my boss asked if I wanted to stay back and do some overtime. I thought, well, extra money's extra money, so I said yes. I went home, had a quick dinner, and came back in. It was raining that night, proper steady rain against the windows, and the whole building had this hollow, echoing feel to it. My boss was working away in her office, which was some distance from mine, and to get to my little room, you had to cross this narrow catwalk. So there I was, sitting there typing, listening to the rain, the machines silent for once, and after a while I started getting restless. For some reason I still can't really explain, I decided to go up and have a look at those empty offices. I grabbed a torch and climbed the creaky old stairs. Dust everywhere. The beam of the torch swept across the floorboards and into these abandoned rooms with old desks and shadows pressed into the corners. I stepped into one room and immediately felt it. You know how sometimes a place can feel wrong the second you enter it? It was like that, only stronger. Like I'd walked into a room full of people I couldn't see, and every single one of them wanted me to leave. The air felt charged, almost electric. Not threatening exactly, but deeply unwelcome. I backed out slowly, heart already thumping, and then I noticed a shaft of light spilling in from the old ballroom. And there, in that single pale beam, I saw a man and a woman dancing. Just dancing together, quietly, gracefully, as if the ballroom were still alive and full of music only they could hear. I can tell you now, I have never moved so fast in my life. I nearly fell down those stairs trying to get out of there. I grabbed my bag, bolted across the catwalk, and headed straight toward the main office. And just as I got there, my boss came hurrying toward me, white as a sheet, handbag over her shoulder. She looked at me and said, "Where were you?" And I said something hopeless like, "That's a bit hard to explain." Then she asked, very sharply, "You didn't go into those upstairs offices, did you?" I remember just staring at her and saying, "No. Why?" She said, "Come on, I'll tell you across the road." So we left and went to the pub nearby. Over a drink, she told me what had happened to her. She'd been in her office doing paperwork when she started hearing the sound of people typing and talking outside. Not clearly enough to make out words, but enough to sound like an office in full swing. Every time she got up to check, there was nobody there. But that wasn't the part that frightened her most. What really shook her was that, just before she left, she saw a woman walk past her office. An actual woman. By the time she reached the corridor, no one was there. Then she saw me, looking terrified, and that was enough for both of us. I told her what I'd seen in the ballroom, and we sort of made an unspoken agreement not to talk about it too much at work. Of course, I told my best mate later because there was no way I was keeping all that to myself. That place was strange, no doubt about it. Properly haunted, if you ask me. I never did find out who the man in overalls was. I looked into the building's history later and found there had been a few worker deaths there over the years, so maybe that explains him. Maybe Chaz was one of them. Or maybe not. Who knows? I just hope whoever he was, he's finally found some peace. This all began about 5 years ago, right at the start of the pandemic lockdowns in Turkey. Before that, our apartment always felt open and full of life. We had these huge windows that usually filled every room with sunlight, and the whole place felt warm and normal. But once the lockdown started, everything changed. The air in the house felt strangely heavy, like something dense and invisible had settled into the walls. I spent most of my time at my computer back then. My desk was positioned near the bedroom door, and from where I sat, I could catch a sliver of the hallway out of the corner of my eye. That's where I started seeing them. These tall, dark figures, almost like moving stains in the air. They weren't still. They shifted and trembled, like reflections on disturbed water. And every time I turned to look straight at them, they disappeared. But as soon as I faced my screen again, they came back. That went on for weeks, maybe close to a month. I lived with this constant feeling that something was watching me. I started sleeping with my door locked, in complete darkness, hoping that would help. But it didn't. The heaviness stayed. Then one afternoon, I was home alone, and I saw one of those figures again. This time, instead of freezing, I got angry. Really angry. I started shouting at it, cursing at it, saying anything I could think of. And the second I stopped, the whole atmosphere changed. Even though it was only late afternoon, the sky outside suddenly went unnaturally dark, and the electricity cut out. Then I heard it. A sound coming from my room. High-pitched, almost musical, like a flute mixed with a human cry. It wasn't random noise either. It was a melody. A very deliberate, eerie melody. I stood in the kitchen, staring down the hallway, and I could see my room getting darker by the second, like the shadows in there were thickening into something solid. I called my neighbors right away, asking if they could hear it too, but none of them heard anything. And then I saw it. A hand, waving from inside my room. I was so terrified I thought I was going to throw up. Then suddenly, the lights flickered back on. My family had just come home. Not long after that, I left. I packed up and stayed with my grandmother in another city because I couldn't handle being in that apartment anymore. But whatever this was, it didn't stay behind. At my grandmother's house, I started seeing the same dark shapes again. So at that point, I realized it was never just about the apartment. It felt like it had attached itself to me somehow. One time I was on a video call with friends, and they swore they saw a floating, smiling face behind me. That honestly shook me more than anything, because for the first time, it wasn't only me seeing strange things. What made it even stranger was that this presence seemed to react to certain things I said. Years earlier, back in high school, I had made a cruel, cynical joke about babies. The moment the words left my mouth, my metal water bottle exploded. The lid shot upward, hit the ceiling, and even though the bottle had been completely full, it was suddenly empty, bone dry. And there was this horrible smell in the air, like sulfur. Then during the pandemic, I was on Discord joking with friends about jinns and spirits, and the same kind of thing happened again. This time, it was a plastic bottle. The cap blasted off, and smoke started coming out of it. Sleep wasn't any safer either. I kept having these nightmares that felt too vivid to just be dreams. In one of them, a pack of black dogs ran over me, while an old, tall man stood nearby smiling, just watching. In another, I was trapped in this endless white space, with giant metal spheres spinning wildly around me. There was this bizarre building nearby, and from its windows, these clown-like figures with yellow eyes and sharp teeth stared at me, licking their lips like they were waiting for something. Then came the last time. By then I had moved again, to the house I live in now. One night, I was walking from my room toward the kitchen, and I saw it standing there in the hallway. We were maybe several meters apart. A yellow street light from outside was shining behind it, so for once I could see it clearly. Not just a flicker, not just something in my peripheral vision. Clearly. We just stood there, staring at each other. It lasted what felt like 2 full minutes. But this time, something was different. I wasn't panicking the way I used to. I wasn't feeding it the same fear. And then, in the strangest moment of all, it lowered its head and slowly shook it from side to side. Not angrily, not threateningly, more like disappointment. Like it had expected something from me and didn't get it. Like it had failed. Then it started to fade. It became transparent and disappeared completely. And since that night, I haven't heard the melody again. I haven't seen the shadows either. So now, looking back, I honestly feel like whatever it was had been feeding off my fear for years. And the moment it realized it couldn't anymore, it gave up and left. That's the part I still can't explain. Not the fear, not the visions, not even the melody. It's that final look of disappointment. That's what stayed with me most. You know, it really started when I was about 10, maybe 11. We were living in this strange house out on a wide, empty stretch of land, and just beyond it, maybe 50 meters away, stood an old school. It was always there in the background, quiet and still, like it was watching everything. There was something wrong with that house. I felt it even back then, though none of us said it out loud at first. Any animal we brought inside would change. It didn't matter if it was healthy, calm, full of energy. After a while, it would grow agitated, almost mean, and then it would die. The vets always blamed stress, but deep down, we didn't believe that. My parents once got me a little parakeet, bright green, playful, always chirping. I was so happy about it. But that very first night, right before bed, I looked out my window toward the dark schoolyard and saw someone standing there. Just a figure, completely still. I tried to convince myself it was probably the groundskeeper or somebody passing through, but the second I got into bed, I had that awful feeling again, that heavy feeling like someone was staring straight at me. I couldn't sleep in my room that night. I ended up in my parents' bed, curled up between them, terrified and embarrassed at the same time. The next morning, the bird's cage looked like something had exploded inside it. Seed everywhere, water spilled. The little swing snapped loose. And the weirdest part was, I hadn't heard a single sound during the night. Not one flutter, not one crash. A few days later, the bird got sick. It started making this faint, raspy sound when it breathed, like its chest was filling with dust. We tried medicine, tried everything, but it kept getting worse. On the 5th day, we found it dead in the cage. I still remember how quiet the room felt. After that, even animals outside seemed to react to me differently. Dogs would growl when I walked past. Cats would puff up and hiss. Birds would take off the moment I came near. It was like something had clung to me, something they could sense even when I couldn't. Then one afternoon, I was sitting in the living room when a pigeon slammed straight into the window. Not like it got confused, more like it threw itself at the glass on purpose. And in that split second before it dropped, I saw the figure again, out near the schoolyard. Same stillness, same feeling. Only this time it felt more certain, like it wanted me to know it was there. At that point, only my family and an elderly man on the top floor were still living in that building. He was kind, really kind. Every few weeks he'd bring me some tiny gift, like a toy car or a marble puzzle. Just little things. I liked him. He felt safe. One day, I went upstairs to bring him some food, and he didn't answer. The next day, still nothing. My father called for him over and over, then finally forced the door open. I remember the smell before I saw anything. Sharp, metallic, wrong. He had taken his own life. I never understood why. What stays with me most, strangely enough, is what was sitting on the table beside him. The last little toy he had bought me. A small blue truck. Untouched. A couple of years later, when I was 12, we moved into a round cluster of apartment buildings where a bunch of our relatives lived close together. In summer, all the kids would stay outside until evening, running around until the sky turned purple and the adults started calling us in. Of course, that made us want to see it even more. One afternoon, 4 of us snuck over there and climbed in through a broken window. It was broad daylight outside, hot, sunny, normal. But inside that house, it felt like dusk. The air was freezing, and not just cool, unnaturally cold. The kind of cold that makes your skin tighten. I went in last. The others were already joking around, calling into the darkness, saying things like, "Come on out, we'll settle your debts for you." They were laughing, and then all at once, the laughter stopped. A scream cut through the house. I've never heard anything like it before or since. It was close, too close, and it didn't sound human. We all froze. I remember that so clearly. None of us wanted to turn around. It felt dangerous even to move. Then one of the girls with us nervously laughed and said, "Okay, stop. That's not funny." And she looked at us, pale as paper, and whispered, "That wasn't me." Before anyone could even process that, the scream came again. This time it was right behind us, near the window we had entered through. Higher now, sharper. And it didn't stop. It just kept going, without a breath, without breaking, like something impossible was forcing it out. We ran. We didn't even know where we were running to. We just tore through the house, stumbling over warped floorboards, trying to get as far from that sound as we could. But it followed us. It curled through the rooms with us. I could feel it in my teeth, in my chest, in my bones. We made it to the far side of the house where there was another window. Someone shoved it open, and one by one the others climbed out. I was last. And I swear to you, as I jumped, the scream was still pouring after me, like it was chasing me out. The second we were all outside, the whole house started shaking. Not just creaking, shaking. The walls groaned. The ground seemed to vibrate under our feet. It felt like the place was waking up angry, or collapsing inward on itself. We stood there grabbing each other, too scared to run any farther, and then suddenly, it stopped. The scream ended a few seconds later, but I still hear it sometimes, even now. Sometimes in dreams, sometimes when I'm almost asleep. Sometimes it feels far away, and sometimes it feels so close, I can almost feel it against the back of my neck. Then when I was 17, I was on a bus heading to the hospital with a family member, and we passed the ruins of that first house, the one near the school. It was decayed by then, peeling walls, empty windows, everything gray and dead-looking. And there, in 2 separate windows on different floors, were 2 dark figures. One looked almost like a woman. The other had no clear shape at all. The bus slowed as we passed, and for what felt like forever, maybe 10 or 15 seconds, I looked straight at them, and they looked straight at me. I can't explain how I knew, but I knew they recognized me. And I recognized them too, even though I had never known what they were. In that moment, everything came back at once. The bird gasping for breath, the toy left on the table, the endless scream in that ruined house. All of it felt connected. Not random, not separate. Like whatever had been there from the beginning had never really let me go. And the clearest feeling of all, the one I still can't shake, is this. They had been waiting for me. I've never been able to shake this one memory. It's still so clear to me, even now. I was around 8 years old, so this would have been sometime in 2003 or 2004, and I'm in my 30s now. I was at my childhood home, just a completely ordinary afternoon. My mom had asked me to help by folding some laundry in the spare room. It was one of those rooms that mostly held storage, except for when family or visitors came to stay. So I'm sitting on the bed, folding clothes, nothing unusual at all. And then I noticed the curtain move by the window. At first, I honestly thought it was my cat creeping along the windowsill behind it. The movement looked exactly like that. I remember waiting for him to step out from behind the curtain. But that's not what happened. Instead, what came out was a hand. Not transparent, not shadowy, not blurry. It was this glowing white hand, almost solid-looking, but at the same time it felt unearthly. The best way I can describe it is like bright white energy taking the shape of a human hand. I can still picture it perfectly. When it first appeared from behind the curtain, it pointed toward the wall 3 times, like it was trying very deliberately to show me something. I was completely frozen. I couldn't make sense of what I was seeing. Then it slipped back behind the curtain for maybe a second or 2. And then it came out again. This time, it pointed directly at me. 3 times. That was it for me. I panicked. I ran straight out of the room, down the hallway, screaming. I found my mom and told her what I'd seen, but she brushed it off and said it was nothing. But for me, it was absolutely terrifying. It stayed with me for years. I never saw it again, and eventually I kind of buried the memory and stopped talking about it. Like, maybe if I ignored it, it would feel less real. Then, a few years ago, I went to see a medium for something completely unrelated. During the session, she brought up my family home. She said the house was like a crossing point, a place where lost spirits gathered, trying to move on. She even mentioned that the area around the house felt unusually dark at night, especially near the gate and driveway, because of the energy there. I hadn't told her a single thing about what I saw as a child, and hearing that brought the whole memory rushing back. Looking back now, I'm not sure that whatever I saw was trying to hurt me. I actually wonder if it was trying to get my attention for a reason. Maybe it wanted help. Maybe it was trying to show me something, and I was just too young and frightened to understand. Of course, part of me still wonders if it was something darker. I honestly don't know. But I do know this. It felt real, and I've never forgotten it. And sometimes I still catch myself wondering what would have happened if I hadn't run. This happened back in 2023 when I was still living with my former partner Adrian in this old apartment just outside town. It was one of those places that had clearly been standing for generations, even though it had been fixed up a few years before we moved in. The layout was unusual. You walked straight into the kitchen when you came through the front door. On the next level up, there was this tiny bathroom and a small room we used as both a living room and an office. Above that was our bedroom, and then downstairs, in the basement, there was this big space we used for laundry and gaming. What made it stranger was the history of that basement. It had once been part of an old cellar, and apparently there had been some kind of passage connected to the church nearby, leading somewhere no one could really explain. Even before anything happened, that detail always stayed with me. The whole town had a strange feeling to it, honestly. I've always been the kind of person who picks up on things strongly. Certain places affect me more than they seem to affect other people. When we first moved in, I already had this uneasy feeling, like something about the apartment wasn't right. But I brushed it off because I was excited about starting that new chapter of my life. Over time, though, that feeling got heavier. I constantly felt watched, like I was never really by myself, even when I knew I should have been. One night, I was sitting on the couch in the living room, just trying to unwind and watch a movie. Then I heard footsteps in the kitchen below me. Not normal footsteps either. It sounded like someone slowly dragging their feet in slippers across the floor. I paused the movie and called out to my partner, asking if he was downstairs. No answer. Then, almost right after that, I heard clicking sounds from the basement, like someone using a mouse at a computer, and I could have sworn I heard his voice too. So I tried to reason it away. I thought maybe it was part of the movie, maybe the sound had carried oddly. But the footsteps came again, louder that time. I remember sitting there frozen, trying to act like it didn't bother me, and eventually I just forced myself to keep watching. That wasn't the only time. Another evening, I was in that same room when I heard someone in the bathroom across from me, like the sound of a person taking off their clothes, moving around, getting settled. The bathroom door was in plain sight, so if anyone had gone in there, I would have seen them. I asked out loud if someone was there. Again, nothing. No answer, no movement, just that awful silence afterward. The worst moment happened later that year. I had gone to bed like normal and fallen asleep without any trouble. Sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up and saw this figure standing at the foot of the bed. It was dark, almost blending into the room, except for its eyes. I remember them so clearly, these glowing reddish eyes fixed on me. It moved toward me very slowly, and then all at once, it lunged forward. The second it did, I jolted awake fully, and at that exact same moment, the fire alarm exploded into sound. I tried shaking my partner awake, but before he even really responded, the alarm suddenly stopped on its own. The next morning, I checked it, expecting maybe the batteries were dying or it had malfunctioned. But no, it worked perfectly. I never figured out what any of it was. Part of me wondered whether it had something to do with that old church passage beneath the building. Another part of me thought maybe something had followed my former partner home from work. He worked at a mortuary then, so that thought definitely crossed my mind. But deep down, I always felt it belonged to the apartment itself, like whatever was there had been there long before we arrived. And honestly, I still believe something remains in that place. Hi, I'm Mael, and this happened to my mom, Stefan. Before I tell you what happened, there's one thing you should know about her. She's always had terrible headaches, and this story took place long before me and my brothers were born, so it must have been around 20 years ago. At the time, my dad's side of the family was all gathered at my grandparents' house because a family friend had just passed away. Everyone was staying over, talking quietly, remembering him, that kind of thing. My mom didn't really know the man very well, and on top of that, she had one of her bad headaches, so she decided to go lie down early. Eventually, everyone else went to sleep too. Now, my mom is the kind of person who sleeps right on the very edge of the bed, She shifts a little, and she's basically halfway to the floor already. So sometime in the middle of the night, she suddenly woke up because she felt this weight pressing down on the side of the mattress, like someone had sat there. It was enough to make her feel like she was slowly sliding off the bed. She opened her eyes, still half asleep and disoriented, and there was a man standing beside the bed. She had never seen him before. He was tall, bald, and dressed for winter. A heavy coat, bulky snow pants, the kind of clothes people wear during a real Canadian cold snap. And he wasn't looking at her. He was looking at my dad, who was asleep beside her, and he was waving his arms like he was trying to get his attention. My mom was confused and groggy, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. She turned toward my dad and tried to wake him up. But when she looked back at the man, he was gone. Just gone. The next morning, my mom went straight to my aunt, my dad's sister, because she felt like she was the only person who might actually believe her. She told her everything exactly as it had happened, and as she was listening, my aunt suddenly went completely pale. She said, "Wait here," and rushed out of the room. A minute later, she came back holding an old photograph. She showed it to my mom, and the second my mom saw it, she recognized him immediately. It was the same man she had seen standing beside the bed the night before. And that's when my aunt told her. The man in the picture was the family friend who had died. So let me share something with you, because this is important. When people think about darkness or negative spiritual forces, they usually picture something obvious, something terrifying, something they would instantly reject. But that is rarely how it shows up. Real darkness is subtle. It is persuasive. It understands people deeply, and it knows exactly how to reach us through the places where we feel lonely, unseen, ambitious, wounded, or hopeful. I witnessed this very clearly in a session with a client I'll call Nora. During the session, her higher self guided her into a past life where she saw this pattern unfold in a painfully vivid way. And what came through was not just disturbing, it was revealing. It showed how spiritual exploitation can begin with something that looks noble, even generous. In that life, she found herself as a man of high status, maybe in his mid-40s. He was refined, educated, respected, and financially gifted. He moved easily among influential people. He understood patterns, strategy, and money almost instinctively. From the outside, he had everything: wealth, status, access. But underneath it, he was alone. He had no real partner, no children, no true emotional closeness. And that quiet loneliness mattered more than he realized. At some point, he received an invitation to join a cause that was presented as meaningful, important, even beneficial to society. In trance, Nora spoke as him and said, "They told me it would help people. They made it sound honorable. And because I was on my own, because I wanted to do something worthwhile, they knew exactly how to reach me." That is one of the first ways these traps begin. They do not usually come dressed as evil. They come wrapped in purpose. Once he became involved, the truth did not reveal itself all at once. It emerged slowly, piece by piece. By the time he understood what he had entered, he was already deeply entangled. He realized the organization was not serving the good at all. It was invoking dark forces and trying to direct them toward power and control. In the session, Nora described this enormous column of dark energy at the center of a ceremonial space. She said it was massive, alive somehow, pulsing with intention. And she understood that the people involved were trying to influence the course of human events, not through wisdom or service, but through domination. What struck me most was how trapped he felt. He kept saying, "I was naive. I missed the signs. I didn't want to believe it could be true. And that is another piece of this pattern. Once someone has invested their time, identity, reputation, or resources into something, it becomes incredibly hard to pull away. The mind starts bargaining. Maybe I'm mistaken. Maybe I can fix it from the inside. Maybe leaving will make things worse. Those thoughts can bind a person more tightly than chains. At one point, I guided him back to the moment he fully understood the danger. He described himself hiding behind one of the stone columns in a ceremonial hall, trying not to be seen. He could sense the threat all around him. From where he hid, he saw robed figures standing in a circle around that dark, energetic column. He said the atmosphere felt cold, calculated, merciless. The column itself was not physical stone, but a vortex of dense, living darkness. And from it, thin, energetic threads were extending outward in every direction. When I asked where those threads were going, he said they were reaching into people, into the city, into the land itself. He felt they were draining vitality, willpower, creativity, life force. He said it was as if thousands of people were being harvested energetically without knowing it. And then came the clearest understanding of all. The ritual was about control. They wanted influence over people's choices, their creative power, their sovereignty. They wanted obedience. They wanted human beings emptied out enough to be directed. What made it even more painful was that this man realized his own gifts had been used to support the system. His intelligence, his strategic mind, his financial abilities, all of it had been redirected towards something harmful. He thought he was helping. Instead, he had become useful to the very thing he would have rejected had he seen it clearly from the beginning. There was also another heartbreaking layer to this. His higher self later showed that there had been ordinary people who tried to help him leave. Kind, decent people. Not wealthy, not influential, not part of his class. But because of his pride, he dismissed them. He could not imagine that help would come through those he had been conditioned to see as beneath him. That matters. Because darkness does not only work through fear or greed, it also works through superiority. Through the belief that only certain people are worthy of trust, or that asking for help would somehow diminish you. In that past life, he could not reconcile what he had become part of. He could not face the shame. He could not receive help. And eventually, he chose a final escape that ended the life in grief and despair. But the soul remembers. When Nora came into this life, she was carrying the echo of that experience in ways that seemed unrelated on the surface. She struggled to express herself. She felt like her voice was blocked, almost buried inside her chest. She was gifted, intelligent, creative, and yet when it came time to step forward, she would freeze. She had a deep resistance to being visible, even though part of her clearly wanted to sing, speak, write, and be seen. She also had physical symptoms and emotional suffering that reflected the same pattern of depletion, suppression, and self-betrayal. There was a profound sense that she did not fully belong here, and a longing for somewhere else that felt more like home. There were even dark thoughts that pointed toward exhaustion at the soul level. As we continued the session, the core issue became clear. She was still carrying an energetic agreement with darkness from that lifetime. That was the turning point. I asked her directly if there was an agreement there. She said yes. Then I asked if she was willing to cancel it. Again, yes. And with full presence, she spoke the revocation. She chose to release every agreement with darkness and surrender instead to divine light, to the source of all, to love itself. The energy in the session changed immediately. Once that agreement was consciously withdrawn, the attachments connected to it could finally be released. There were several. One felt like a presence feeding on her doubt and silence. Another appeared like a snake around the throat, muting her voice and restricting expression. There was also an old energetic pattern tied to lifetimes of hiding, shrinking, and making herself invisible. As those were cleared, she described both the damage they had caused and the relief that followed. She could feel how much her voice, power, and life force had been compromised. And then she could feel healing light entering those spaces. The deeper lesson here is something I really want you to hear. Darkness often begins by identifying a real need. It finds the place where someone longs for belonging, purpose, recognition, safety, or love. Then it offers something that appears to meet that need. Something noble, impressive, spiritual, or important. Once the person is invested, the truth is revealed slowly. Then pride, shame, fear, and complicity do the rest. The mechanics are the same. A real need, a deceptive promise, gradual entanglement, then shame. But the good news is this: these agreements can be dissolved. That is what Nora's higher self made so clear. She was not doomed. She was not permanently contaminated by what happened. She was not meant to stay silent. She was free to reclaim her purpose, her gifts, her visibility, and her voice. The guidance that came through for her was simple and powerful. Love yourself, because darkness exploits the places where self-love is missing. It convinces people to accept harmful bargains when they have forgotten their own worth. And then came the clearest message of all. She was meant to be visible, meant to be a light, meant to stand where others could hear and feel her presence. That mattered deeply because in that past life, visibility became dangerous. In this one, visibility became part of the healing. So if you recognize yourself anywhere in this story, maybe in the feeling of being muted, drained, trapped, ashamed, or strangely unable to step into your own power, I want to tell you this gently and clearly. You are not bound forever by what you agreed to in confusion, loneliness, fear, or desperation. You can revoke what no longer belongs in your life. You can release what has attached itself to your silence. You can reclaim your voice. You can choose truth over shame and love over self-punishment. And whatever part of you is still connected to wisdom, to spirit, to your higher self, it has not abandoned you. It is still there, still waiting, still guiding you home. I want to tell you about a place my family lived in years ago, because even now, I still think about it. We moved into this old farmhouse that was well over a century old. It sat by itself on a ridge just outside a small town, surrounded by thick bush and scrub. There were no close neighbors, no traffic, no city sounds at all. Just wind, trees, and this heavy kind of silence that made the whole place feel strange from the start. Even before we finished unpacking, something about it felt wrong. Later, we learned no one had really lived there for nearly a decade. At first, it was easy to brush things off. We would hear little tapping sounds at night, soft footsteps, the odd bang somewhere in the house. Nothing dramatic, nothing you could point to and say, that's definitely not normal. So we made excuses for it. Old timber creaks, animals outside, the house settling, our imagination. But after a while, it stopped feeling that simple. We started hearing voices. Sometimes it sounded like people talking softly in another room, too muffled to make out. Other times it was whispering so close it felt like it was right beside you. There were moments when two of us would hear the same thing, and other times only one person would catch it. We also kept seeing movement out of the corner of our eyes, dark shapes passing where no one should have been. I kept trying to tell myself it was just bad lighting, or my mind filling in blanks. Then there was the growling. We had a few small terriers, and at first we assumed it had to be them. But their growls were sharp and yappy, and what we heard in that house was deeper, heavier. Maybe it still was the dogs. I can admit that. But it never sounded quite right, and that stuck with all of us. The first time I really felt shaken was when I caught something on video. One afternoon, I was filming in my room, just making a casual video and talking through some of the things I had on my shelves. Later, when I watched it back, I noticed this dark figure move past the window behind me. It looked human-shaped, just crossing the frame and disappearing. I tried to reason it out straight away. Maybe it was someone in my family walking outside. But it had been raining, and no one had any reason to be out there. I can't prove it was anything strange, but it didn't feel normal. Not long after that, I started waking up with scratches. We had cats as well, so again, I tried to explain it away. But the marks were spaced too wide apart, much wider than claws should have been, and sometimes they showed up when the cats hadn't even been near me. That part still unsettles me, because I never found a good explanation for it. The house layout made everything feel even weirder. There was this long hallway that ran from the kitchen toward the garage, and from the living room, you had a clear view straight into it. A friend of mine, Mara, who never believed in any of this kind of thing, stayed over a few times. We'd be sitting there late at night watching TV, and both of us, at the exact same moment, would see what looked like someone walking down that hallway toward the garage. Not a quick flicker, not just a shadow. It looked like an actual figure moving through. And it didn't happen only once. It was almost like the same moment kept replaying itself every so often. The part of the house that bothered me most, though, was where I slept. My room was in this section built underneath the house. It was technically attached, but you couldn't get to it from inside. You had to go out the back, down a narrow path, and enter from underneath. So every night, I was down there on my own. Near that area under the house, there were water pumps and an access door leading into the crawl space beneath everything. On the day we were moving out, we checked underneath there and found something none of us had ever seen before. There was a pentagram drawn on the ground with old candles placed around it. The candles looked used, melted down and dusty, like they'd been sitting there a very long time. We had lived there for years and somehow never come across it until then. And that wasn't even the only strange thing on the property. The land around the house was rough and overgrown, full of rock and bush, so we didn't explore much. But one day, Mara and I wandered farther out than usual, maybe a few hundred meters from the house. We found this odd little area tucked between huge rocks, with a couple of cactus plants growing nearby. Scattered between the boulders were old baby dolls and pieces of newspaper that had aged so badly you could barely tell what they were. We went back and told my granddad, and he came out with us to see it for himself. It felt disturbing enough that we actually called the police, because we honestly thought maybe something terrible had happened there. They came out and looked into it, but nothing ever came from it. In the end, we were told it was probably rubbish left behind years earlier by someone who had owned the property. Even my grandparents, who are the most skeptical people I know, couldn't make sense of that house. They never called it paranormal, not once, but they did admit there was something there they couldn't explain away. What made everything feel darker was what happened with my younger brother. Before we moved there, he was easygoing and calm. After a while in that house, he changed. He became angry all the time, tense, constantly on edge. He said he felt like something was touching him, shoving him, scratching at him. And even after we left, he still talked about feeling like something had stayed with him. We also lost several pets while we lived there. That's one of the parts that hits me the hardest when I think back on it. Before that house, and ever since, we never had that kind of run of loss with our animals. It was only there, only during those years. We've lived in a newer home for a long time now, and from the day we moved in, everything changed. No strange sounds, no voices, no shadows, no unexplained losses, just a normal, quiet life. Peaceful, the way a home is supposed to feel. And honestly, I'm still not here to tell you with certainty that it was something paranormal. Some of it probably did have ordinary explanations. Maybe some sounds were animals. Maybe some shadows were tricks of the eye. Maybe fear made us notice things more. I can accept that. But there were also moments that none of us could explain, even the people in my family who never believed in any of this stuff to begin with. And that's the part that has stayed with me. This all happened close to 9 years ago now, and lately I've been going back through old photos and videos just to see what's still there. Maybe I'll find something that makes more sense of it, or maybe I won't. But I know how that place felt, and I don't think I'll ever forget it. I need to tell you about this road trip we took in the spring of 2021, because even now, I still replay it in my head, and I can't quite explain it. My little daughter couldn't say ghosts yet. She called them gofis. At first it was adorable, but then it stopped being so cute, because she didn't just ask if there was a gofe. She kept asking where it was, everywhere we stayed. And the weird part is, by the end of that trip, all of us were kind of asking the same thing. Now, I'm not someone who blindly believes every paranormal story I hear. I'm pretty cautious with that stuff. Most of the time, there's a normal explanation if you look hard enough. That's usually where I land. But I think most people have that one story they can't quite shake, the one that never settles into a neat, rational answer. Before this trip, I only had one experience like that. I was probably 10, maybe 11, at a sleepover with a bunch of neighborhood kids at a river house a friend's family owned near the Chesapeake. I'll call him Blake. On the drive there, Blake casually suggested we use a Ouija board that night. He said not to worry, because last time he'd contacted safe spirits. That phrase alone was enough to make all of us laugh nervously. Then he told us that the last time he used the board, his cousin had tried to contact the devil as a joke. He told her to stop. She didn't. And that night they both had the exact same nightmare, except from opposite sides of it. In her dream, she chased him with a knife. In his dream, he chased her. So naturally, all of us were completely freaked out before we'd even gotten to the house. That night we sat upstairs in this open sleeping room with laminate floors and beds lined up against the walls. Somebody brought out the board, and we all put our fingers on the planchette, trying not to be the one who moved it. We asked all the predictable questions kids ask. Stupid questions, dramatic questions. Then I asked when I would die. The planchette slid to the number 7, paused. Then it moved again. 7, 77. I still remember that. I wish I didn't, but I do. A little later, someone asked for a sign. The second they did, a metal coat hanger shot across the floor from under the beds and slammed into the far wall. Every one of us screamed. Now, even to this day, I can still tell myself maybe Blake's older brother messed with us somehow. Maybe he tossed it. Maybe there was a trick to it. But years later, I checked with one of the older kids who'd been there, and she remembered it exactly the same way I did. No hesitation, no doubt. My wife, Vanessa, has always had more stories like that than I have. She grew up, from middle school on, in this old Virginia house that local people said had once been used as a makeshift Civil War hospital. Beautiful place, huge yard, horse out back, all of that. But there were parts of the floor that were stained dark, and if someone told you it was blood, honestly, you'd probably believe them. She used to hear voices in that house. One night, she told me, she had to walk through a guest room she hated to get to the bathroom. She always rushed through it. But this one night, she froze in the doorway and heard a low, sharp voice say, "Where's my sword?" That one has always stuck with me. So between the Ouija board thing and Vanessa's stories, I already had enough material in my head to scare myself. But still, deep down, I was a skeptic. Then came the road trip. We'd been living in Los Angeles when the pandemic hit. After a few months of lockdowns, protests, smoke in the air, and feeling boxed into our apartment, we finally decided to drive east and stay near family in Virginia for a while. It ended up being nearly a year. Hard in all the obvious ways, but also kind of sweet in hindsight. We got all that extra time together we never would have had otherwise. When it was finally time to drive back to LA, it was me, Vanessa, our son Oliver, our daughter, who I'll call Frankie here, and our ancient little chihuahua, Cornbread. We love road trips. We love weird stops, old diners, small towns, random motels with too much character. That turned out to be part of the problem. Our first strange stop was in Ohio, at this lakeside lodge inside a state park. The rooms were little cabins spread through the trees, and it felt kind of like summer camp. The kids loved it immediately. Oliver claimed the top bunk in their room. Frankie wanted the top two, of course, but we talked her into the bottom bunk. That night, sometime in the dark, Oliver suddenly appeared at the foot of our bed, absolutely panicked, climbing in with us and looking back over his shoulder. He said there was a ghost in the room. We assumed he'd had a nightmare. Frankie was already wedged in bed with us, Cornbread was curled against Vanessa, and we were all too tired to do much besides make room for him. But the next morning, Oliver was completely adamant that he had not been dreaming. He said the lamp in his room had gone dark. When he touched it, it came on. When he lifted his finger, it went off. He got scared, scrambled down from the bunk, and ran to our room. But before he climbed in, he saw a white glowing light floating in the corner of our bedroom. As he told the story, he walked over and pointed exactly where it had been, right by the TV. So immediately I thought, okay, reflection. Outside light bouncing off the screen. Easy enough. But then, when I walked up to the main lodge to return the key, I jokingly asked the woman at the desk whether the place had any ghosts, because my son thought he'd seen one. She got very serious. She asked Oliver, "Was it a glowing light floating in the air?" And when he said yes, she nodded and said, "That was an orb." Then she reached behind the desk and pulled out an old photo somebody had taken of one. I'll be honest, the photo looked like the kind of thing that could just be a camera flare. But Oliver immediately said it looked like what he'd seen, except his was moving. The woman went on to say kids reported seeing things there all the time, mostly in the manor house, not the cabins. She talked about footsteps, doors, even a ghost cat she claimed to see darting through rooms. And while she was talking, my brain did exactly what brains do when they're trying not to be scared. I started making jokes in my head. Great, perfect, the orb has left the building. It's chosen my child. It's hitching a ride west with us. Ridiculous, obviously. But on the walk back to the cabin, Oliver casually said, "Oh yeah, I forgot to tell her about the voices." I stopped walking. The voices? He said when he saw the light, he also heard voices in his ear. He couldn't understand what they were saying. Just voices. I did that thing parents do when they are internally spiraling but trying not to show it. Oh, very cool. Then we got in the car and left. That evening we reached this old inn on Lake Michigan. Beautiful place. Gardens, beach access, lots of charm. Definitely older than I'd bothered to think about when I booked it. It felt strange, but still. Old building. Wiring. That was enough for me. Then during the night, I half woke up and thought I saw Oliver running across the room. Not walking, running. My sleepy brain tried to explain it away, but even then I remember thinking, why is he running? I fell back asleep. The next thing I knew, Vanessa was standing over me in the dark, whispering in a panic, "The door is wide open. Where's Cornbread?" I sat up, and sure enough, The main door to our room was open almost flat against the wall. I jumped up, ran through the inner doors, and found Oliver asleep in his bed, with Cornbread curled up beside him. Both sound asleep. The room itself looked totally normal, except that our door was standing wide open to the hallway. I went over, looked out, and saw nothing. Long, narrow hall, old rug, darkness at the far end, no sound at all. I shut the door, locked everything again, put the chain on carefully, and got back in bed. Vanessa and I just stared at each other. We both wanted an explanation. Maybe Oliver had sleepwalked. Maybe Vanessa had. She has sleepwalked before, especially years ago when she briefly tried Ambien for insomnia. I once found her standing at a window in the middle of the night, just staring out into the dark. Another time I found her asleep in the bathtub. Another night she was trying to work the deadbolt on our front door while completely out of it. So yes, sleepwalking was technically on the table. But still, something about that night felt off. Later, Oliver showed up at our bed again, breathing fast and saying he was cold. That may not sound strange, except Oliver was the kid who never wore jackets, never wanted blankets, never wanted socks, no matter how cold it was. So I took him back to bed, tucked him in, and quietly asked whether he remembered getting up earlier or opening the door. He looked at me like I was speaking another language. He remembered none of it. The next morning, over breakfast, Vanessa and I agreed that night number 3 needed to be boring. No more charming inns, no more character. We wanted something plain, bright, forgettable. By late afternoon, we were looking for a place somewhere in Minnesota. I was juggling the dog leash while Cornbread barked at some much larger dog in a park, so Vanessa took my phone and found a hotel that looked fine. New enough. On a college campus. Safe. Boring. Perfect. I booked it without thinking much about it. About half an hour later, Vanessa was on her phone making that face people make when they've found information they wish they'd known earlier. The boring hotel had originally been built in the 1880s as an infirmary. Students with contagious illnesses had stayed there. Civil War veterans had been treated there. There were stories online from people claiming to see figures in the halls. When we pulled up, it was drizzling. Fog everywhere. The whole place had this eerie, hushed feeling before we even got out of the car. Inside, our room was nicely renovated. Totally normal. But the hallway to get there was wrong in a way I can't fully explain. Too narrow. Sharp turns where there shouldn't be sharp turns. Like it had been designed to mess with your line of sight. You could never see more than a few steps ahead. That night, everybody went to bed with this weird, half-joking tension hanging over us. Sometime around 4 in the morning, I woke up to Cornbread pacing. Not just awake, pacing, panting, staring around the room. One of the lamps was on. Then I noticed another lamp on too. Everybody else was asleep. I turned the lamps off, picked up Cornbread, and realized I had to take her outside, which meant going into that hallway alone. So I did. I told myself it was nothing. Then I looked down at Cornbread. Every hair on her back was standing up, and she was staring in the same direction. That's the part I can't talk myself out of. I kept walking anyway, because what else was I going to do? I turned the corner expecting... Honestly, I don't even know what I expected, and there was nothing there. Nothing at the next turn either. I got her outside, she did her business, and on the way back her fur had settled down. Whatever she thought she sensed, if she sensed anything at all, it was gone. I got back into the room, and instead of sleeping, I stayed up writing everything down, because I knew if I didn't, I'd later convince myself it had all felt less strange than it really did. The next morning, after we left, Vanessa was digging through Oliver's backpack at breakfast, looking for a pen, and pulled out this little ceramic saucer. Worn, chipped, dirty. Oliver casually said he'd found it under a dresser back at the cabin in Ohio, Vanessa and I just stared at each other. I asked him why he took it. He shrugged and said he didn't know. I put it in my pocket, and later, while we were driving through this dry, empty stretch of land, I cracked the window and tossed it out. I know how that sounds. I know it sounds ridiculous. But I didn't want that thing with us anymore. And after that, nothing. That was the strangest part. We stayed at another motel later on, out in the Badlands, in the middle of this barren landscape where it felt like, of course, something weird ought to happen. And absolutely nothing did. No flickering lights, no open doors, no floating glow, no voices, no pacing dog, no gophies. Just one quiet, boring night, which by then felt like the greatest luxury in the world. So I've got this friend I'll call Mason. That's not actually his name, but it works for the story. We've been close for a long time, and over the past couple of years, we got really into mechanical stuff. Fixing engines, messing around with mini bikes, old machines, anything we could get our hands on. Most of that happened in his garage, mostly because, well, that's where all the tools and junk were. What's strange is, before we started spending time out there, I never thought much about the garage at all. It wasn't attached to the house, so when I came over, we'd usually just hang out inside. And honestly, the house never felt that weird to me back then. Nothing stood out. Nothing felt off. That changed once we started using the garage regularly. Pretty quickly, both of us started noticing little things. Sounds that didn't make sense. That uneasy feeling you get when you suddenly don't want to turn your back on a room. Every now and then, something would happen that neither of us could explain, and after a while, it stopped feeling like coincidence. There's some history there too. Before Mason was born, his mom had been married once before. From what I was told, her first husband died suddenly, had a heart attack in the basement during the night, and nobody realized until the next morning. I know that kind of story sounds almost too perfect for a haunting story, but I'm telling you, the things that happened there were real. One day, Mason and I were planning to work on this old snowmobile his grandpa had passed down to him. We opened the garage door, got everything ready, and then realized we were missing the impact driver. Mason said he thought he'd left it inside, so we went back into the house to look. We got distracted for a few minutes, grabbed some snacks, wandered around a bit, then headed back out. And right as we stepped through the front door, we both looked down toward the garage and watched the big bay door slam shut on its own. Not drift down, not slowly close, slam. We both just froze and looked at each other like, did that really just happen? Then, without even saying much, we turned around and went straight back into the house. Neither of us was in a hurry to deal with that. Another time, Mason, me, and another friend, I'll call him Derek, were hanging out in the garage late one night. We had this little setup in there with an old couch and a table, and that's where we usually sat. The garage had two sections, a smaller bay where we actually worked, and a bigger one used mostly for storage. In the larger side, there was a staircase leading up to this rough second level, basically just plywood flooring and stacks of old stuff. That upstairs area still held a lot of belongings from the man who had died. We almost never went up there. While we were sitting there talking, all three of us heard footsteps above us. Slow, heavy, deliberate footsteps, like someone pacing across the plywood overhead. Not a creak, not a mouse. Actual steps. We all heard it, and that's what made it so unsettling. It's one thing when you hear something alone and start doubting yourself. It's another when everybody in the room goes silent at the exact same moment because they heard the same thing. But the moment that sticks with me the most happened when Derek and I were in the smaller bay, trying to install an aftermarket carburetor on his mini bike. I was bent over doing the work, and Derek was standing a few feet behind me near the open garage door. Then we heard it. A metallic clink against the concrete. Every so often, another little metallic hit. Derek and I both got quiet. The whole room just felt wrong. We finally gave up on the mini bike, stepped outside, and decided to wait there instead. A minute later, we looked down the driveway and saw Mason still coming back from the house. So whatever we'd been hearing in there, it wasn't him. We used to spend a lot of time in Mason's basement too. It was finished, set up almost like a little den, with a TV in the corner and a couple of couches. One night, the three of us were down there watching something, and eventually everybody passed out. Mason slept in his room downstairs, and Derek and I crashed on the couches. Sometime in the middle of the night, Derek woke up and said something to me, but I was so half asleep, I barely registered it. The next morning, though, he told me he'd heard someone talking behind the couch. Behind the couch was the boiler room, and that room was the one place in the basement nobody liked going into. It had this heavy, unsettling feel to it all the time. Derek was dead serious when he said he heard a voice coming from in there, like someone quietly speaking just out of sight. At first, I wasn't sure whether to believe him, but after everything else, it didn't feel so easy to brush off. The next morning, I ended up talking to Mason's mom and stepdad about it. What really got me was how calm his mom was. She barely reacted. She just kind of shrugged and said that weird things happened in the house all the time, and that she believed it was probably the spirit of her first husband. She said they often heard strange noises on the main floor, especially around the bathroom, sometimes even voices. And directly under that bathroom was the boiler room. Right above it had been Mason's old bedroom. He told me more than once that when he used to sleep in there, he'd hear his closet door shut on its own, and the whole room would suddenly feel wrong, like something was standing there with him. What always messed with me most was how random it all was. These things didn't just happen when someone was alone and tired and imagining stuff. Sometimes it happened with a whole group of people around. One afternoon, Mason, his parents, and I were all in the kitchen and living room area. It was basically one open space. His mom was unloading dishes, his dad was standing across the kitchen, Mason was over on the couch, and I was just nearby watching them talk. There was an open cupboard above the counter, and inside it was a plastic cup sitting on the top shelf, way back where only Mason or I could normally reach. Out of nowhere, I watched that cup fly out of the cupboard and land right near my feet. Not tip, not fall, fly. It crossed several feet and hit the floor with enough force that everybody stopped and stared. Mason was way too far away. His dad wasn't even close. His mom was bent down at the dishwasher. There was nobody in position to touch it. And I still can't explain that one. That's the part that stays with me. Not just one weird sound. Not one creepy moment at night. It was the fact that things kept happening, over and over, in front of different people, in different parts of the house and garage. Enough that you stop trying to come up with excuses. I still don't know what was in that place, but I know this much. Something there didn't like being ignored. Welcome back, friends, to the Paranormal M channel. Been having trouble sleeping lately? Don't worry, we've got you. We hope these spooky stories help you relax and drift off a little easier. Thanks so much for sending in all your paranormal experiences, and please, keep them coming. Oh, and drop a comment below and tell us what you do for a living. I'm honestly really curious what our everyday listeners are up to. Now, switch on your bedside lamp, put on your headphones, and let's dive into today's paranormal experiences. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. Thanks. Okay, so I've lived in this house long enough that I almost forget how weird it sounds when I say it out loud. But I'm telling you, this place has history. And not the cute, old wallpaper and creaky stairs kind either. Our house was built in 1948, and the first couple who owned it stayed there for decades. Until somewhere around the late 80s, early 90s, when my granddad, Ray, bought it. The story we got handed along with the deed was not comforting. Apparently, the original owner, his name was Mr. Hollis, I think, died in the bathroom. Heart attack, just like that, while he was getting a bath going. His wife only realized something was wrong when she saw water slipping out from under the door. And when she opened it, she found him. I've heard different versions, like whether he fell beside the tub or collapsed right near it. But either way, that bathroom has never felt like just a bathroom since. And ever since then, it's been like the house kept a piece of him. Now, most of what happens is small, subtle, the kind of stuff you can shrug off if you want to sleep at night. Like you'll be home alone, actually alone, and still get that heavy feeling, like someone's standing just out of view, listening. We've seen quick shadows cut across doorways, little wisps that look like smoke in the corner of your eye. And every so often, this one always makes my skin tighten. We'll catch a whiff of cigar or pipe tobacco, just floating through the air for no reason. None of us smoke, but Mr. Hollis apparently did. And then there's the whispering. Not like a full voice, not like a movie. More like your name being breathed so softly you almost convince yourself you imagined it. Almost. At night, I'd hear movement in the kitchen. The tiniest clinks, like silverware shifting, or an empty can rolling a little on the counter. And the locks, oh my God, the locks. Doors will just lock themselves. And one time, I swear on everything, every exterior lock on the house just stopped cooperating. Keys that worked yesterday suddenly wouldn't turn. It felt like the house was saying, no, not right now. But the part that really messed with us was when things started moving right in front of us. We're a hunting family, so sometimes you'll find random little things around, like an empty shotgun shell sitting on a shelf in the living room, just because someone emptied their pockets and set it down. More than once, those shells didn't just fall. They jumped. Like they launched from the back of the shelf, hopped over other taller stuff, and hit the floor like they were swatted. And my mom, Dana, has this vintage comedy doll in a little glass display case. Not a toy anyone plays with. It's more like a don't touch it display piece. We came back from a day trip once, some candy place. I think it was one of those factory tours, and that doll had rotated inside the case, like a clean 90-degree turn, facing a totally different direction. Nobody had been home, and even if they had, who goes out of their way to twist a doll inside a glass cabinet? So yeah, weird, but still manageable. Until the scary stuff happened. That story alone messed me up for a long time. But the worst thing, the one that still gives me a cold rush when I remember it, happened to me when I was about 12. So let me explain the layout, because you have to picture it for this to hit the way it hit me. My bedroom door opened right into this short hallway. My sister Kira's room was across from mine. Halfway down the hall on the left was that bathroom, the one where Mr. Hollis died. And just before you hit the bathroom, on the right, there's an opening into the living room. If you step into the living room and go straight across, you're basically lined up with the dining area, and then you cut left into the kitchen. And the floors. The floors are original hardwood, old enough that they talk back. We've got a crawl space too, so footsteps don't just sound like footsteps. They feel like them. Every creak travels. So it's late, like midnight, maybe later. I should have been asleep, but my door was open, just cracked enough that I could see a sliver of the living room opening down the hall. The house was dark, but not totally black. Just that dim, nighttime gloom where your brain keeps trying to invent shapes. And suddenly I got that feeling. You know the one. The someone is moving toward you feeling, like your nerves notice before your eyes do. And then I heard it. Footsteps starting from the kitchen, moving across the living room, coming straight toward the hallway. And it happened fast, like within 2 or 3 seconds, and my whole body just went rigid. The sound changed as it got closer too. It stopped sounding like normal steps and started sounding like someone in slippers. This slow, dry shuffle, the way an older person might drag their feet without picking them up all the way. Shuffle. 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 It entered the hallway, and then it stopped. Right at my door frame. Not in the hall somewhere, not near the bathroom, not drifting off in the living room. Right there. And I couldn't see anything. I couldn't hear breathing. I couldn't hear a voice. Just the presence. Like something standing there, angled toward my room, aware that I was awake. I felt like my heart was trying to crawl out through my ribs. And then, after a second, maybe 2, it started moving again. Shuffle. 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 Backing away the way it came. Out of the hall, back across the living room, and toward the kitchen. And the second it was gone, I swear to you, I didn't breathe until it left. I didn't scream. I didn't move. I just laid there thinking, if I move, it'll come back. And I'm not proud of this, but I'll be honest, I almost peed myself. That's the kind of fear it was. The kind that doesn't feel like scared. It feels like your body has decided you're prey. Okay, so I need to start with a little context, because the house is basically a character in this story. When I was about 10, my family moved into this older place. Mid-century kind of old, like 50s-ish, maybe early 60s. It had this weird little cluster near the front. The entryway, the door into the garage, a small living room, a tiny kitchenette, and the laundry area, all kind of packed together. The important part is, sound traveled really easily. If someone opened the front door, you could hear it from the garage. If someone spoke in the entryway, you'd hear it in the laundry room. Nothing was insulated from anything. Fast forward a few years. I was 14, taking the bus home after school. Most weekdays, I'd have the house to myself for a bit, about an hour, hour and a half, before my mom got off work and my sister Maya got home from campus. I had a routine. Let the dogs out, do whatever little chores I'd been assigned, snack, start homework. Same thing every day. And then there was the garage. I hated the garage. Not for any logical reason, really. It just had this heavy, unpleasant feeling, like you were walking into a room that didn't want you there. So whenever I had to go in, I'd do it fast. In and out. No lingering. That afternoon, one of my chores was taking recycling out. So, of course, garage time. I'm in there, dumping bottles and paper into the bin, trying not to look around too much, when I hear it, clear as day. The door opens. It shuts. And then this loud, bright voice goes, "Hi, Riley." And it's Maya's voice. Like, unmistakably her. Same tone, same cadence, like she'd just walked in and was announcing herself. I didn't even think. I just answered automatically, still facing the recycling bin. I went, "Oh, hey Maya." No reply. I finish up and I walk into the entryway like normal, expecting to see her dropping her bag or kicking off her shoes. And there's nobody. So I say again, louder this time, "How was class?" Nothing. And now I'm confused, and my stomach is starting to do that slow sinking thing, so I call out one more time. Maya? Hello? Silence. I check the front door. It's still locked. I check the back door. Locked. I even stand there staring at the lock like it's going to tell me the truth if I glare hard enough. Then I look at the time, and my brain goes, wait, she can't be home yet. Because Maya was painfully punctual. Like the kind of punctual where you could set your watch by her schedule. And she wasn't due back for at least another half hour, maybe 40 minutes. So now I'm standing in the middle of the house with the dogs looking at me like, why are you vibrating? And I realize, very calmly and very desperately, that whatever just greeted me was not my sister. I didn't scream. I didn't do anything dramatic. I just said out loud, like I was speaking to a person who could hear me. Okay, I'm going outside now. And I grabbed the dogs and went straight into the backyard. And I stayed there. Like, I stayed out there the whole time, just pacing and petting them and trying to act normal, while also listening for any sound coming from the house. I waited until my mom's car pulled in. Then I waited until Maya actually walked through the door for real. Only then did my body finally unclench. Just like that. Casual. Like he was saying the microwave ran hot. He told me he felt watched constantly, like almost all the time, and that certain areas of the house made his skin crawl for no reason. And hearing him say that was such a weird relief, because I realized I wasn't the only one who'd felt that strange heaviness, but nobody really talked about it while we lived there. I always remember how much I hated being upstairs alone. At night it was worse, but even during the day it felt wrong. Like you were waiting for something you couldn't see to step out. I finally told my mom the whole Maya's voice story not that long ago, honestly way later than you'd think, and she just stared at me, completely stunned. Then she told my stepdad, and he had the same reaction. Even Maya got quiet when I explained it to her, because it's such a specific thing to hear your own voice used like that. And the creepiest part is, we loved that house. Like we genuinely did. Great memories there. It wasn't some horror movie dump. It just had moments. Okay, second story. Different place, different vibe, but still the same feeling of, wait, did that just happen? A few years ago, I went on a trip to the city I live in now. It's one of those places with old buildings, history everywhere, and the kind of reputation where if you stay long enough, someone eventually tells you a ghost story like it's local weather. My mom and Maya surprised me with a ghost walk, night tour, storytelling, the whole thing. I was so excited. I've always been into paranormal stuff, and honestly, I loved the atmosphere of those tours. It was late, shops closed, streets quiet, that slightly echoey nighttime sound. At one point, our group stops in this little loading area behind a store. The guide is mid-story, and she transitions from one haunting to another, like she's setting up the next part. And right as she starts, there's this sudden, sharp impact on the door beside us. Not a creak, not a tap, a slam. It sounded like an open hand smacking the inside of the door, flat palm, full force. Everybody jumped, like full body flinch. Then people did that nervous laugh thing, you know? The, okay, that was weird, laugh. And the guide, she looked genuinely thrown, like she wasn't doing a bit. She went quiet for a second, like she'd lost her place. And I remember thinking, oh, she didn't expect that. My mom claims she didn't hear anything, which still makes me laugh a little because the group reaction was so immediate and so collective that it's hard to believe it was nothing. Could it have been someone messing with us? Totally possible. It was near a building entrance, and people do mess around. But the timing, the sound, the guide's face, there was this tiny moment where it felt like the city itself answered the story. So yeah, those are my two big ones. I'm older now, and I'm still fascinated by all of it. I'm not someone who wants to believe every little thing is a ghost. Like, I try to be rational. I try to debunk stuff. But those two moments have stuck to me in a way that normal, weird noises just don't. And honestly, even if there's a simple explanation, the feeling of being 14 in that garage, hearing Maya say my name like she was right there, I don't think I'll ever forget that. Okay, so I'm telling you this mostly because I need to hear myself say it out loud, you know? Like, I know what I saw. I've known it for years, but I still find myself wanting someone else to weigh in and tell me I'm not crazy, or maybe to fill in a gap I can't fill on my own. So this happened when I was about 10, late spring, back in 2001. My dad Ronnie and I took a day trip to go trout fishing near this little stretch of mountain country outside Cass, West Virginia. It was one of those simple days that felt big when you're a kid. Just the two of us, the rods, the cooler, the quiet. We fished most of the day, moving along the water, and by the time the sun started dropping, we were tired in that good way. We headed out around dusk, maybe 7-ish, give or take. And this was before everyone had a phone with a map in their pocket, right? No GPS telling you, recalculating. It was just my dad following his memory, and whatever road signs happened to still be standing. Well, he took a wrong turn. At first, neither of us really noticed. It just turned into one of those roads that gets narrower and rougher the farther you go, like it's quietly daring you to keep driving. Gravel, potholes, tree branches leaning in. The kind of road where you start thinking, we probably shouldn't be here. After maybe 40 minutes, or close to an hour, my dad finally admitted what we both already knew. We were lost. The gas gauge wasn't exactly comforting either. He found a wide-ish spot in the road and did this careful, multi-point turn, the truck crunching and groaning over the gravel. Now here's the part that matters. On the way down, I didn't see much. I was in the passenger seat, and all I could make out was the slope of the mountain beside us. Once it got properly dark, maybe 20 minutes into that wrong road drive, everything outside the headlights disappeared into this thick black. But on the way back up, I saw something. And I need you to understand what I mean when I say I saw it. Not like a shadow, not like a trick of the eyes. I mean, in that instant when the headlights sweep across something and your brain goes, that is a person. About halfway back up the mountain, off to the right side, maybe 30 yards, maybe a little more, I saw what looked like a young girl sitting on a stump. She was facing away from the road, like she was turned slightly from us, and she was wearing a white nightgown. Her hair was long and dark, straight down her back to about the middle, and she was holding something against her chest. It looked like a teddy bear, or maybe one of those soft stuffed dolls, something a kid would cling to. The weirdest part, what sticks with me the most, is that she seemed to stand out against the darkness. Like the white of the gown wasn't just catching the light, it was present. Almost luminous. Not glowing like a flashlight or anything dramatic. Just unnaturally clear. Like she didn't belong to the same darkness as everything else around her. And even after the truck passed and the headlights moved on, I swear I could still see her for a second. Like my eyes held onto the image. I remember blurting out, "Dad, did you see that?" He was tense already, focused on the road, and he just went, "See what?" I told him, "A girl, sitting out there, alone, in the middle of nowhere." Not long after we got off that mountain road, like not even a huge stretch of time later, we hit a little gas station. The kind where you fill up first, then walk inside to pay after. Dad got out, started pumping gas, and before he went inside, he asked if I wanted anything. Obviously, I did. I told him what snack I wanted, and I reminded him, again, about the girl. He nodded and said he'd tell the clerk. He came back with my drink and my snack and slid into the driver's seat like it was just another stop on the way home. And I asked him, right away, "Did you tell them? About the girl?" He said yes, but I stayed in the truck. I didn't hear the conversation. I didn't see anyone react. I have no proof he actually said anything at all. And then we drove home. Late. Quiet. Here's what messes with me. I still don't know what I saw. I've gone through phases where I tried to label it. Ghost, missing kid, some kind of local legend I just didn't know about. For a while I even wondered if it was one of those creepy folklore things people talk about online, but the more I read, the less it fit. I've looked up records. I've tried searching the area as best as I can remember it, and there's just nothing. No clear reports that match. No obvious tragedy that lines up. And over time, the exact location has gotten fuzzy, like the mountains themselves swallowed the details. There weren't houses out there. No streetlights, no mailbox, no sign of a nearby homestead. At least, not that I remember. Just forest. An old mountain road that felt like it used to belong to logging trucks and nothing else. And the other thing, this part really gets under my skin. My dad denies it ever happened. Completely. Like he genuinely doesn't remember, or like he refuses to remember. I can't tell which is worse. So that's why I'm saying it like this, straight to you. I'm not claiming I solved anything. I'm not even claiming it was paranormal. I just know that, one night on a mountain road in West Virginia, I saw a little girl in a white nightgown sitting on a stump, holding a stuffed toy, waiting in the dark like she'd been there forever. And I've never been able to explain. Okay, so I should probably start with a little context, because otherwise this is going to sound completely unhinged. My partner, Lena, and I got engaged in late 2015, and right around that same time, I'd just started a new job that had me driving all over the place. We moved into our first apartment together that winter, one of those older complexes built in the late 70s. Not super run down, just dated. Brown doors, weird carpet, that kind of vibe. The whole place was built along a hillside, with a handful of buildings stacked up the slope like steps. That first night, we had basically nothing. An air mattress, 2 pillows, and our little dog Mochi, a tiny spaniel mix, maybe 12 or 13 pounds soaking wet. And I remember lying there thinking, why does this feel like someone else is in here with us? Not like a boo moment, more like the air was wrong. But we brushed it off. New place, new sounds, new nerves. Then the little stuff started. At first, it was lights. We'd leave the living room light on for Mochi when we ran out, and come back to find it off, and the hallway light on instead. Or we'd swear we turned something off, and later it'd be glowing like we never touched it. For a while, we blamed each other. Like, no, you left it on. No, I didn't. You know how it goes. But then Mochi started acting weird. She'd sit up like she heard something, then suddenly bark and sprint down the hallway like she was chasing an invisible intruder, right up to the front door. We assumed it was neighbors on the stairs, but that didn't fit. We'd hear actual footsteps outside, and she wouldn't react at all. But those moments when there was nothing, that's when she'd lose it. One day, Lena worked late, and I was out of town for my job. Mochi was in her crate longer than usual, and when Lena got home, our dog had a nail broken almost down to the quick. Not a snagged nail. This looked like something had twisted it. The emergency vet patched her up and said she looked fine otherwise, but after that, we barely used the crate. It just felt wrong. And then we had the first, okay, what the hell was that moment. Lena's brother, Dylan, came over one afternoon. She was telling him all the weird little things, and he's laughing, waving it off like we're being dramatic. And I swear to you, the moment he says, "You guys are overthinking it," a metal baking sheet we had wedged in the entry closet suddenly launches out and slams into the inside of the front door. Not falls, not slides. It came out like someone grabbed it and threw it. And the stupid part is, we stood there in this heavy silence, all three of us, just staring at the closet like it might do it again. Dylan didn't laugh after that. Closet stuff became a theme. We'd hear the latch click, then the door would slowly open by itself. Not swinging wildly like a draft, just creeping open like someone was easing it from the inside. There was also this locked utility door in our second bedroom, the HVAC closet. No knob, deadbolt. Only maintenance had the key. One day, Lena's sitting at her computer and she hears a click, like a lock turning. The door opens. Just opens. Like someone unlocked it from the other side. We called maintenance. They acted annoyed and insisted it must have been loose. Sure. Another time, we'd hung a full-length mirror on the outside of that bedroom door so Lena could check her outfit before leaving. We were goofing around one evening, kind of play-chasing each other, and she closed that door gently. Not slammed. Barely even a thud. The mirror exploded. That was the point where we stopped joking about it. And then the seeing things started. One morning, Lena took Mochi outside, just down the hill near a patch of trees. She came back in, pale and quiet, and told me she saw a figure, humanoid but wrong somehow, like it had a kind of tall headpiece or crown shape. No clear face, no clear gender. It stepped behind one tree, and when she stared at that tree trying to make sense of it, it leaned out from behind another tree farther away, like it had moved without walking. We started digging online, trying to find anything, and we found this story about construction in a nearby area years ago, workers accidentally disturbing what was believed to be a burial site. The remains were later reburied in a cemetery, on the same hill. I'm not saying that's definitely connected. I'm just saying we read that and sat there like, oh, great. But the worst stuff didn't feel old or sad. It felt predatory. Later on, after I switched to a night shift job, Lena was home alone one evening. She'd just cleaned the kitchen and was in bed winding down when she heard what sounded like absolute chaos. Pots and pans clanging, things crashing, like someone was wrecking the kitchen. And then she heard a voice. Not loud, not screaming, just clear as day in her head. Lock the bedroom door. So she did. And right after she locked it, she saw shadows under the door, like someone standing right outside. She said the air felt thick, like the room had filled with something heavy and hateful. She stayed frozen in bed until sunrise. In the morning, the kitchen was spotless, not a single thing out of place. Another night, she woke up and saw something kneeling beside her side of the bed. It looked like it was dressed in black, but the face was pale, too pale, like bone under skin. And it had something on its back, like spines or feathers, she could never decide which, and it smiled at her. Then it dipped down and disappeared under the bed. She didn't scream. She couldn't. She said it felt like her body forgot how. And I didn't have a lot of experiences like that, until I did. One night I woke up to Mochi trying to climb into bed, which she almost never did. I lifted her up, and the moment I did, it was like the temperature dropped and the whole apartment filled with this pressure, like a storm cloud inside the walls. I turned toward the ceiling and saw a dark mass coming down through it, like the ceiling wasn't even there. It wasn't shaped like a person exactly, but it was huge, easily 6 feet tall if it stood upright. And it had this spread out shape, like a cape or wings extending several feet on either side. My brain went fully primitive. I pulled the covers over Lena, over the dog, over myself, like a blanket could fix this. And I just laid there, shaking, trying to pretend sleep was a force field. Eventually, the heaviness faded, like it left. Another time, I got up to use the bathroom, and for some reason I went to the hall bathroom instead of the one in our bedroom. I flicked on the hallway light, and it started dimming, like someone was slowly turning a dial down. Then the bathroom light did the same thing. I stood there, and this icy panic hit so fast I swear my body just shut down the need to pee out of self-preservation. I ran back to the bedroom and blurted out, half asleep and terrified, "They're coming." Lena barely registered it at the time, but the next morning I told her what happened. And of course, the lights worked perfectly fine, like nothing ever occurred. We also had a neighbor, sweet woman, young kid. One time Mochi was still alive and we brought her over. Our dog started pacing the apartment like she was guarding it, moving room to room like she was tracking something. And the neighbor's toddler kept smiling and waving at empty space in the corner like someone was playing peekaboo. That same neighbor told us her lamp once turned on, even though it was unplugged, and the bulb had burned out days before. She looked genuinely freaked out when she told us, like she hated even saying it out loud. Eventually, we had a small group of paranormal investigators come by. They didn't burst in with holy water or anything dramatic. They mostly walked around, asked questions, listened, ran some devices. The only real takeaway was, they agreed something felt off. Not boo ghost off. More like the apartment was a place where boundaries didn't behave normally. We moved. Same property owners, different city, newer apartment. And it really was better, but not totally normal. There, things would vanish and reappear days later in ridiculous places. Keys in a kitchen drawer we never used, a missing shirt folded in a basket that had already been emptied. And outside at night, we'd sometimes see these small shapes, about the size of a cat or raccoon, moving along the fence line way too fast, like they weren't exactly physical. Both of us also saw something that looked like a child running along the fences between the neighboring houses, except it moved wrong, too smooth, too quick, like it was skipping frames. Inside that second place, there was this little corner of your eye presence too. Childlike energy, like it was playing hide and seek. You'd catch it darting behind a doorway, and when you turned your head, gone. We eventually bought a house and moved again. And look, life's normal now in a lot of ways. But even here, we still get the occasional disappearing and reappearing object thing. Manageable. Annoying. Weird. Lena and I half joke that one or both of us is followed, because it's like whatever that first apartment was, it didn't fully stay behind. And the biggest twist is, before all this, I didn't believe in any of it. I was the guy trying to rationalize everything. Electrical issues, drafts, dogs being dogs, stress. But after you've seen enough, your brain runs out of excuses. So yeah, I don't know what we ran into. I've heard people suggest a spirit tied to the land. I've heard people say something darker, something that imitates, feeds on fear, pushes into your life. All I know is that apartment on the hill didn't feel empty. It felt occupied. And whatever was there noticed us. So this happened about 5 years ago, and I'm not exaggerating when I say it still keeps me up sometimes. Let me back up a little. My mom married this guy, I'll call him Darren, and we moved into his house. From the outside, it was just a house, normal. But the second we started living there, Everything felt slightly off in this way that's hard to explain without sounding dramatic. It wasn't like constant chaos or obvious horror movie stuff. It was more like the house had moods, like certain rooms carried a weight you couldn't shake. And honestly, the easiest way to describe it is by walking you through the spaces. First, the basement. I hated that basement. Not because it was gross or creepy looking, though it kind of was, but because of the feeling. Every time I went down there, I felt this weird pressure, like something was aware of me. And the worst part was when I'd climb back up the stairs. I'd get this sensation, this heavy, pleading kind of pull, like something wanted me to stay down there longer. Not in a "it's going to grab you" way, more like it didn't want to be alone. Like it was tired of being ignored, tired of being left behind. And the deeper I was in the basement, the stronger that feeling got. It was like being quietly begged by something you couldn't see. Then there was the dining room and living room area. This is the part that makes my stomach knot up, even now. There was this shadowy presence, this shape, that would pace back and forth in a certain stretch of the room. And I swear to you, it moved like it was copying Darren. Not perfectly mimicking him exactly, but following the same pattern, like it had learned his steps. Sometimes I'd sit outside on the front porch. There was this big window that gave you a clear view into the living room, and if I looked in from out there, I'd see it. That shadow would move in slow loops, almost like it was waiting. Like it knew I was out there and it was just circling until I finally came back inside. I started doing this thing where I'd pretend I didn't see it, because somehow acknowledging it felt like the wrong move. And the dreams. Oh my God, the dreams. Living in that house gave me the most vivid, ugly dreams I've ever had. Not symbolic dreams, not weird random stuff. I mean dreams that felt like full, detailed memories. One night, I dreamed someone broke into the house through the basement. In the dream, they were furious, demanding Darren come out and show himself. That's the phrase that stuck with me. Make yourself seen. Like he was hiding, like he'd done something, like he owed them something. A few days after that, I came home late and saw a car in the driveway that I didn't recognize. And there were people getting out, strangers, talking like they were confident. I distinctly heard someone say, "This is the right place." It hit me like ice water because I was home alone. I didn't confront them. I didn't ask anything. I just rushed inside, locked the door, and stood there listening, waiting for the knock that never came. They didn't approach. They didn't even circle the house. And later, this is what messes with me. I couldn't stop wondering if the car was ever really there at all. Like, did that actually happen? Or was it the house bleeding into my head? Then there was my mom's bedroom. My mom started covering it at night, just so she could sleep. And she had her own dreams too, vivid ones. One morning she told me she dreamed of her grandmother, Nana Ruth, who had passed away years before, standing there, dead serious, saying, "You need to remove the item in the basement." The item. We couldn't figure out what she meant. We searched down there, looking through storage, old boxes, corners, everything. Nothing made sense, but there was this one area, way in the back, where the basement seemed to end. Except it didn't. There was a section that felt sealed off, like a room behind a wall. The air back there felt wrong, dense, quiet in a way that wasn't peaceful. And at night? At night, it sounded like someone was in the hallway. Not like footsteps you can brush off as the house settling. I mean pacing, back and forth, and sometimes a dragging sound, like something being pulled. And scratching, soft at first, then sharper, against doors. It happened whether I was alone or whether the whole house was full of people. I used to sleep with my door locked. Every night. I'd tell myself it was just a habit, just being cautious. But deep down, I think I was trying to create one small boundary the house couldn't cross. Eventually, my mom and Darren separated, and we moved out. And once we were gone, I did what you do when you've been holding your breath for years. I started digging. I searched for anything, history, incidents, old owners, anything that could explain why that place felt so hidden. But here's the part that makes everything feel even stranger. I couldn't find anything. Not just no news articles or nothing dramatic happened. I mean, I could barely find records. No clear history, no normal trail. Even information about Darren buying the house felt like it wasn't there, like it had been wiped or sealed or tucked away where regular people can't reach. It was like the house didn't want to be known. And sometimes I wonder if whatever was there wasn't trying to hurt us at all. Maybe it was warning us. Maybe it was trying to get us out, the only way it could. Or maybe it was lonely. Or angry. Or something in between. There's more. There's always more with a place like that. But even telling you this much, I can feel that old tension in my shoulders, like I'm back in that hallway again, listening to something pace outside my door, pretending sleep is possible. Okay, so until 2 nights ago, I would have told you, pretty confidently, that I don't do ghosts. Spirits? Sure, maybe. Weird energy, eerie vibes, whatever. But an actual, in-your-face, something is here with you kind of presence? No, not me, not my reality. And then I finally take this long overdue vacation. My family covered the travel and let me stay at their place overseas, which sounds amazing, right? Like, perfect setup. Free stay, different country, break from work. I genuinely thought I was about to breathe again. Except, this house is haunted. Like, actively, unapologetically haunted. And the worst of it hits between midnight and about 4 in the morning. I'm not even talking about big dramatic movie stuff where you see a floating woman in a hallway. It's subtler than that, which somehow makes it creepier. You'll hear footsteps when everyone's in bed. You'll catch a shadow moving where it absolutely shouldn't be. There are these little bell-like sounds sometimes, like tiny chimes, but not in a cute wind chime on a porch way. More like a warning. And then there's the sound of things shifting, like someone's pushing a chair leg against the floor, or dragging something just an inch and stopping. And the voice thing? That one gets under my skin the most, because you'll hear someone call your name in a voice that sounds almost right. Like your brain recognizes it, but your gut says, nope, not that. The first time it happened, I actually sat up thinking someone needed me. But the hallway was empty. Totally empty. And the doors. I hate the doors. I hate them so much. Not slamming, just the little clicks, like a lock turning. Then the soft, slow creak of a door opening. Then closing again. Like whatever it is has all the time in the world and wants you to know it. I keep trying to convince myself it's the house settling or weird airflow or old hinges. I've tried every logical explanation I can grab onto. But it's happening too consistently, and it always ramps up after midnight like it's on a schedule. Here's the thing. I needed this vacation. I'm not being dramatic. My job has been grinding me down for months. I've been walking around permanently tired, like my body forgot what rested feels like. And sometimes, when it gets really bad, I get this tight ache in my chest, like stress has claws in there. I hate it. So imagine, I show up here already drained, and the haunted house decides I don't get to sleep. I've slept maybe 10 hours total in the last 3 days. That's not an exaggeration. I'm running on fumes and dread. And now my chest is doing that same stressed out ache it does when I'm overloaded at work, which is so unfair because I came here to escape that. My family kind of treats the haunting like bad plumbing. Like, yeah, it's annoying, but you get used to it. Which is insane to me, but they've lived with it for a while, so I guess they've built this mental callus. They told me, very casually, that a priest came once. A Catholic priest. And separately, a medium too. And both of them, independently, were like, yeah, this isn't just a quirky ghost situation. They used the word demonic. Like, what do you even do with that? And then there's the basement. Everyone avoids the basement. Not in a, meh, it's creepy down there way. In a, we do not go down there unless it's daylight and absolutely necessary way. They call it the hot spot. Like it's a bad signal area, but for your soul. The first time I asked what was down there, my cousin Eli just looked at me and went, no, seriously, don't. So I didn't. But even without going down there, I'm still waking up, both nights like clockwork, somewhere around 2 or 3 a.m. It's like my body gets yanked out of sleep, fully alert, heart thudding, eyes wide open. And once I'm up, that's it. I'm stuck listening to the house do its weird little routine. The steps, the shifting sounds, the faint ringing, the door clicks, the almost voices. And I'll lie there staring at the ceiling, trying to bargain with myself. Just ignore it. Just breathe. You're safe. But it's hard to feel safe when it feels like something is moving around just outside your room, like it owns the place. And no one's been hurt, technically. That's what everyone keeps saying. Nothing bad has happened. As if the only thing that counts as bad is getting dragged across the floor or something. Meanwhile, I'm sitting here barely functioning, exhausted, chest aching, nerves shredded, wondering why I ever thought this was going to be restful. So, yeah, that's where I'm at. I'm in this beautiful place I should be enjoying, and instead I'm counting hours of sleep like they're gold coins, listening to doors unlock in the middle of the night, and trying not to spiral. And I genuinely need someone to tell me, like I'm a real person sitting across from you, how am I supposed to get any sleep in a house like this? So, this all went down in late August, and I've been sitting with it ever since. I figured I'd finally tell the story the way it felt in the moment, because I still don't totally know what to make of it. For a little background, I'm a Michigan student filmmaker, freshly graduated, and over the summer I shot my thesis project. It was a short western, and we had this incredible location lined up, an old Wild West-themed resort out in the Irish Hills. It had that vintage, half-faded charm, like the place had been pretending to be a town for decades and forgot how to be anything else. Earlier that summer, I'd done a tech scout with a buddy and the property manager. She was this practical, no-nonsense type, but even she casually mentioned that the place had its moments. Unexplained noises, little weird incidents, stuff moving where it shouldn't. She laughed it off, like, it happens. And me and my friend, being the kind of people who love spooky nonsense, got all excited and joked about doing a ghost hunt. That was it. We didn't really linger on it. Fast forward to the shoot. A day early, I arrived with 2 crew members, Miles and Tessa, to get everything prepped. Nothing dramatic happened at first, but around 1 a.m., we wandered over from the motel area to the Old West town set to grab some B-roll. And I'm not saying I saw anything. I'm just saying I felt wrong the whole time. Like my body had decided we weren't supposed to be there. We also caught this strange little speck on camera, almost like a tiny point of light, that sort of looped and tracked perfectly along the edge of a roofline in frame. Could have been a bug or dust, sure, but it moved like it was following something. The first day of shooting went smoothly overall. Busy, hot, exhausting, normal filmmaking chaos. But at one point, one of our crew, Raya, told me she heard whispering as she walked past one of the rooms. Clear enough that she actually stopped and listened. She opened the door, expecting to catch someone messing around, and there was nobody inside. What freaked her out was the layout. That room had a connecting door that led into our room. So we deadbolted it from our side and shoved the key for the other room somewhere out of reach. Just in case, you know? You do that little, let's not invite trouble thing, even if you don't admit out loud that you're doing it. That night, most of the crew went down the road to our campsite to drink and blow off steam. My friend Jordan crashed early in the motel room. I stayed up in the motel's common room, talking to my girlfriend on the phone and building the next day's schedule. It started raining hard, real steady, heavy rain. But here's the thing, there wasn't wind. None. The trees weren't thrashing, nothing like that. And then I heard this massive crash against the outside wall behind me. Not a little bump, not a branch scraping. It sounded like something big got slammed into the building. I remember going quiet mid-sentence, just listening, waiting for a follow-up sound. Anything. My girlfriend tried to calm me down, like, probably a tree. But the next morning I checked. The closest tree was nowhere near the wall. Like, not even close. And with no wind, it just didn't add up. And then I heard voices outside. Two distinct voices, different tones, like two people having a conversation, just out of view. Not yelling, not whispering, just talking. And it didn't sound like my crew. It sounded like strangers. That's when I decided I was done being brave. I shut everything down, hurried back to our room, and went to bed like I could outrun the vibe. Later, around 2 a.m. or so, Jordan woke up and wandered out. Around the same time, Miles, Tessa, and Rhea came back from the campsite and decided to go night swimming in the pool. As they walked outside, they noticed that a bunch of patio chairs and one of those umbrella tables had been knocked over. They didn't remember it being like that. And then this cat just appeared, like it had been waiting. None of us had seen a cat there at all the previous day, and suddenly, here's this cat acting like it belonged to the place. A little while after that, Jordan went back into the common room and later told me they experienced the same thing I did. That edgy feeling, the peripheral movement, the sense the room was crowded somehow. Out by the pool, it got worse. Miles told me he heard something coming down from the hill, from the direction of the old west town. At first he thought it was one of us messing around, but then he noticed the footsteps didn't have a normal rhythm. It wasn't like step, step, step. It was like step, rustle. 2 steps, rustle, step. A stilted, uneven approach, like whatever it was didn't move the way an animal or a person usually moves. They turned off their music to listen, and all 3 of them heard it. As it got closer, Miles and Tessa both said the air felt different, like the pressure dropped, like the space around them thickened. At the same time, Jordan, still in the common room, got hit with this wave of dread so strong it made them move without thinking. They said it felt like their body already knew something was happening outside. They bolted toward the pool. When Jordan got there, the other 3 were standing with their phone flashlights trained into this bushy area between the pool and the hill. The cat was there too, and it didn't seem friendly anymore. It was agitated, circling, then slipping through the fence line and sitting down directly in front of the group like it was bracing itself. They couldn't see anything in the bushes, nothing reflective, nothing moving. But the second their lights dipped off for a moment, Miles swore he saw eyes. A pair of eyes staring back from inside the brush. That was it. No debate. No, maybe it's nothing. They all sprinted back into the common room and basically barricaded themselves in. And this is the part that still sticks to me. The cat followed them, but it would not come inside. It stayed right outside the door, sitting like a guard. If anyone went near the exit, like they were thinking about stepping out, the cat would get up and physically position itself in the way, like, no, don't. And if the door stayed open for more than a few seconds, the light fixture near the doorway would flicker, hard. Not a gentle little flutter, like a stressed-out pulse. They spent the rest of the night feeling watched, not in a vague, spooky story way, in a very specific, very bodily way, like your skin knows before your brain does. And then toward the end of the shoot, we kept finding our camera batteries knocked loose from the chargers. Like you'd set them in, they'd be fine. You'd turn your back, and they'd be disconnected. Over and over. It became a running frustration until it stopped being funny. I'm still not sure what happened. If you want the skeptical angle, sure, maybe it was a coyote. Maybe it was some animal moving weird through brush. Maybe the voices were people farther down the road, and the rain carried sound strangely. But none of that explains the timing, or the pressure drop feeling, or the dread that hit multiple people at once, or the cat acting like a tiny bouncer with a job to do. I don't know. I just know it was a strange couple of days, and that one night especially felt like the location stopped being a set and started being something else entirely. Hey, thanks for letting me share this. I'm not the kind of person who goes looking for ghosts. Honestly, I've always been pretty skeptical about anything paranormal. But a couple of moments I've had out in rural eastern Finland, they left me with this quiet, lingering unease that I still can't fully explain. So the first thing happened one summer, a few years back. A friend of mine, Sadi, told me about this gorgeous little spot by a lake, one of those places locals mention like it's a secret you have to earn. I went there with my boyfriend at the time, Mika. It was one of those bright days where the air smells like pine needles and warm stone, and everything feels simple. When we got there, it really was beautiful. Calm water, tall pines, birds calling from somewhere you can't quite see. But almost immediately, something felt off. Not dramatic, not like a horror movie. More like my body knew something my brain didn't. And then I noticed something that didn't fit. There was this open patch, almost like a small clearing or meadow, soft grass, a few wildflowers, the kind of space you don't usually stumble upon in the middle of thick pine forest. It looked kept, even though no one was keeping it. And I remember thinking, this doesn't just happen by accident. In places like that, a clearing often means there used to be a house. People lived there once. A life existed there. I tried to brush it off. I told myself, you're just tired. You're overthinking. We walked around, took photos, even sat by the shore for a while. But the feeling wouldn't lift. It was like a weight in my chest, like someone was standing behind me even when I turned around and there was nothing there. Later, months after that trip, I heard a story about the area. Someone at a cafe in a nearby village mentioned that there had been a small homestead there long ago, and the rumor was dark. The owner, they said, was a woman people avoided. Folks whispered that she practiced some kind of folk magic, maybe just old beliefs, maybe superstition, maybe something people didn't understand and turned into fear. But the part that made my stomach drop was this. They claimed her child died in the lake. Not an accident. Something intentional. And after that, the woman supposedly vanished from the village life entirely, and later was found dead as well. Now, I'm not saying I believe all of that. Small communities carry stories like that the way wind carries smoke. Bits of truth mixed with exaggeration, passed from mouth to mouth until it becomes legend. But the way I felt there, that sudden certainty that something was wrong, it made the rumor cling to me in a way it normally wouldn't. And then there's the second thing. This one hits closer because it happened at my own home. I live out near Kumo, further east. Quiet roads, lots of forest. The kind of place where history feels closer because the land remembers. That area saw fighting during the war, and you grow up hearing little pieces of it, but it's easy to keep it at arm's length, until something makes it feel real. One evening, I remember it was early winter, already dark by late afternoon. I was home alone. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet where you can hear the refrigerator click. My cat, Nellie, was curled up asleep on my lap. I was just sitting there, half watching the snow drift past the window. And then, all at once, Nellie snapped awake. Not slowly, instantly. Head up, ears forward, like a switch flipped. She stared at the hallway door the way she does when someone comes inside. And I mean the exact way. Alert, focused, almost expectant. I actually spoke out loud without thinking. I said, "Did someone come in?" Of course, no one answered. Not the cat. Not anything. I told myself it was nothing. Cats are cats, right? Maybe she heard a mouse in the wall. Maybe a pipe clicked. But I'll be honest, my skin felt prickly, like I'd walked into a room mid-conversation. Over the years, there have been other little things too. A soft thud from another room, like something falling off a shelf. Only I'd go look and nothing had moved. Or I'd hear a faint scrape, like a chair leg shifting, when no one was there. Nothing huge. Nothing I could point to and say, that's proof. Just a collection of small moments that leave you standing still, listening. And then recently, I visited a local museum exhibit about the Winter War. I expected maps, uniforms, old photos. But while reading one of the displays, I learned something I'd never been told. Something that made my throat tighten. There had been a field hospital very close to my home, practically next to it. And there was still an old outbuilding, what I always thought of as just a storage shed, where they used to keep the bodies before they could be transported. When I read that, I felt this slow, cold realization. Like the ground under my everyday life had another layer to it, another story. And suddenly, all those small sounds, Nellie staring into empty space, it didn't feel so random anymore. A couple friends have joked for years that that area has spirits. I used to laugh it off. But lately, I don't know. I'm still not out here claiming I've seen a ghost. I'm not trying to convince anyone of anything. I'm just saying, some places hold on to something. Memory, grief, whatever you want to call it. And sometimes, when you're quiet enough, or alone enough, you feel it noticing you back. So every summer, I go to this camp for about 2 weeks, always right at the very end of the season, like the last little stretch of summer before everything shifts back into normal life. And honestly, every single year it's been completely fine. Fun, loud, exhausting in the best way. Nothing spooky, nothing dramatic. But this past summer, I don't know how else to say it, something felt off. Like I kept getting these weird waves of déjà vu over and over. Little moments where my brain would go, wait, haven't I already done this? Haven't I already lived this exact thing? And it didn't stop when camp ended. If anything, it felt like it followed me home. The first night I got back, my bedroom was being painted, so I couldn't sleep in there. I set myself up in the living room instead. And yeah, my living room is kind of creepy at night. Like shadows sit heavier in there. But it's never been a huge issue. I figured I'd just put something on and pass out. I'm watching some random movie. Could have been on Netflix or Hulu. I don't even remember. When I hear footsteps. At first, I'm not bothered. The sound is familiar. Heavy steps like someone walking from the hallway toward the living room. I automatically assume it's my brother, because that's exactly what it sounds like. Like he got up and wandered out. But then, a few seconds pass, and it hits me. He isn't even home. He was staying at my dad's that night. And the second I remember that, my stomach just drops. Like my whole body went cold all at once. I pause what I'm watching and just sit there, completely still, trying to listen. I'm not even breathing right. I tell myself maybe it's the house settling. Maybe the TV made me imagine it. Maybe I'm tired. And then I hear it again. Footsteps. Not a creak, not a pop of the floor. Actual steps, like someone walking with purpose. I don't jump up. I don't scream. I just quietly change what I'm watching to something safer, like some cozy comfort movie, like my brain thinks that'll protect me. And I'm sitting there trying to act normal, like if I act normal, nothing can touch me. After a while, I decide to call my best friend. Her name's Talia, because we hadn't talked in a couple weeks, and I missed her. I'm in the middle of telling her about camp, laughing a little, finally relaxing, and then I glance up for literally half a second, and I see something. This shadow, sliding back behind the wall in front of me, like it realized I noticed it and tried to hide. And I'm telling you, it wasn't a trick of the light. It wasn't a car passing outside. It moved in a way that was too smooth, too intentional, like liquid, like it had shape and it chose to pull away. My entire body reacted before my mind did. I just froze, and my voice got shaky, and I remember whispering, "Oh my God." I grew up Catholic, and when I get scared like that, it's like instinct takes over. I started praying out loud without even thinking, like full-on desperate prayer. And I actually yelled, something like, "I rebuke you in the name of Jesus Christ," which is not me. I'm not usually dramatic. I'm not usually the type to panic like that. But it felt like the air around me had changed, like something was in the room with me and I wasn't imagining it. The next day I called my dad, because he's the kind of person who's into paranormal stuff. He listens seriously when people talk about things like that. And he told me this whole explanation, like maybe I can see into other realities or something, and that what I saw could be what he called a shadow person. I'm not gonna lie, I don't know if I trust that as an explanation. It felt a little too convenient, like slapping a label on something you can't prove. But still, hearing a name for it didn't make me feel better. If anything, it made it feel more real. Then, not that long after, something else happened. I'm in the bathroom, and I hear someone softly singing right outside the door. It's a woman's voice, light, quiet, almost like she's humming but actually forming the words. And the song is Summertime Sadness, except in my head, I remember it being a different Lana song at first, like video games or something, because I remember thinking, of course it would be Lana, of course. And that's what freaked me out even more, because Lana is one of my favorite artists. Like, I know those melodies in my bones. I freeze immediately, just standing there, phone in my hand, not moving. And the first thing I do is hit record. I don't even step out yet. I just record, hoping the sound picks up so I can prove to myself I'm not losing it. Then I open the door and step out slowly, and the singing stops. The hallway is empty. No one is there. My mom wasn't home. No TV was on. No neighbors above me, below me, nothing. Just quiet. So I go back and listen to the audio, expecting at least something. Nothing. Absolute silence. Like the recording never captured a single sound in the first place. Later that night, Talia comes over, and I tell her everything. like I'm trying to make it sound casual, but I can hear how nervous I am. She's like, "Show me the video." So I open my camera roll, and it's gone. The video I know I recorded isn't there. And that part wasn't as terrifying as it was just wrong. Like reality was glitching, like something didn't want proof. Then the most recent thing. That's the one that still messes with me, because it felt so direct. It was late, like around 2 in the morning, and I went into the kitchen to get food because I couldn't sleep. Ever since that first night, the kitchen at night has felt hostile. I don't know how else to describe it, like it's waiting for me to walk in there. But I was hungry, and I told myself I was done letting fear control me. So I put on a YouTube video, shoved my AirPods in, and tried to act like it was nothing. I'm grabbing something to eat when I hear it. Through the AirPods. Heavy footsteps again. That same weight. That same rhythm. Like someone walking nearby, close enough that my whole nervous system could feel it. My heart starts pounding so hard I can hear my pulse. I start praying immediately, quietly at first, then faster, because I'm trying to keep myself from spiraling. I snatch my food, grab my phone, and I'm basically speed walking out of the kitchen like, don't look around, just go. And as I'm going back toward my room, I swear to God, something says my name. Not a whisper I could dismiss, not a sound that could have been the video. It was clear, clean, like it was spoken right into the air behind me. I ran, actually ran into my room and slammed the door behind me, shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone. And I told my friend, she's really religious, really. And without even pausing, she goes, "That's the devil." And I just sat there afterward, in the dark, thinking, I don't know what any of this is, but I know what it felt like. And I know I'm not imagining how real it sounded when something called my name. So, this is going to sound strange right from the start, but just stay with me. I had this dream where I knew I was dreaming, like I was inside a dream that was happening inside another dream. And in it, I'm sitting at this oval table, the kind that feels too familiar even when you can't place where it's from. Across from me is a woman, maybe late 40s, early 50s, nothing dramatic about her. Soft brown hair pulled back like she'd done it 1,000 times, thin-framed glasses, a calm face. The kind of person you'd pass in the grocery store and never think twice about. And beside me at the table is my partner. Let's call him Jonas. He's quiet, like he's listening but also bracing for something. The woman looks straight at us and says, very clearly, like she's delivering instructions, "We have to find Kemslauser house." Then she pauses, and her voice drops just slightly, like she's being careful with the words. That's where the trauma in Jonas's family is buried. Not metaphorically buried. It felt placed there, stored there, like the building itself was holding it. And then I wake up, but only from the inner layer of the dream. I'm still dreaming, just in a different scene, and somehow that makes total sense. In that half-awake dream logic, the very first thing I do is grab my phone and look it up. Not slowly, not doubting it, just, of course I'm going to search it. And here's the part that made my stomach flip. It comes up immediately, like it's a real thing, like it's been waiting for me. The search result is this unsettling snippet about a priest, someone described as unstable, dangerous, the kind of man whose name gets whispered long after he's gone. The story says he drove people into madness, and then, this is the part that chilled me, he put them to sleep. Not gently, not kindly. The phrase felt wrong, like sleep was being used as a weapon. In the dream, Jonas and I go right away. No debate, just movement. We're suddenly traveling, and I can't tell exactly where we are, but everything outside the car looks flat and gray-green, with that neat, damp countryside feeling. It could be the Netherlands. It could be somewhere along the German border. The sky hangs low, like it's pressing down. Then we reach it. The building looks old, heavy, and somehow unfinished, like it never decided what it wanted to be. And on the outside, there are these little letter tiles, like Scrabble pieces, stuck all over the facade. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds. Different colors, different sizes, scattered without a pattern. And it's not cute. It's not artsy. It's like language broke apart and got pinned there. Like someone tried to spell something and gave up halfway. Or like the house rejected meaning. While we're standing there, I call my mom. Let's call her Mara, because in the dream it feels urgent that she needs to know. I tell her, kind of breathless, "I'm here. I found it. This place from my dream. Kemslauser House." And she just goes, flat as anything. "Okay." No questions, no concern, just, "Okay." Like I told her I bought milk. That almost scares me more than the priest story, honestly. How normal she sounds while I'm standing in front of this nightmare house. We pull into the parking lot and everything feels grim. Not spooky in a fun way. Not, ooh, haunted. More like walking into a place where something bad happened and never really stopped happening. And then I remember we have our child with us. In the dream, I suddenly feel this sharp hesitation, like my body knows before my mind does. Do we really go inside with a kid? I wake up for real. For actual real. And the air in my room feels too bright, too normal, like the world is pretending nothing happened. A few minutes later, my mom, Mara, walks in, and I sit up and blurt out, "Do you know a place called Kemslauser House?" And she says, genuinely confused, "No." So now I'm wide awake, heart still racing, and I grab my phone and try to search it again. Nothing. No results. No building, no priest, no folklore. Like it never existed. Like the internet just closed its mouth. And I'm not ready to let it go, so I try asking ChatGPT, because if anyone's going to pull a thread, maybe it's that. At first, it doesn't find anything either, but I keep poking at it, giving it more detail, describing the priest, the legend vibe, the supposed location, and then it suddenly starts responding like it knows. It tells me Kemslauser House is tied to local legends. It describes eerie stories, strange phenomena, madness, visions, a priest who changed people. It even says it's in Germany, somewhere around Saxony-Anhalt. It reads like a confident little summary of something that's been documented for years. But here's the problem. I still can't find any outside sources. No articles, no maps, no photos, nothing. So I tell my sister, let's call her Elise, and she tries asking too. And when she does it, ChatGPT can't find it. It gives her nothing. So now I'm stuck with this unsettling situation where I dreamed a name I'd never heard before. In the dream, I found it instantly online. Awake, it doesn't exist. And the only place it appears is in one weird, inconsistent AI response that won't repeat itself. And I don't know what bothers me more, the possibility that my brain invented the whole thing, or the possibility that it didn't. Because that woman at the table, she wasn't dramatic, she wasn't mystical. She was calm and certain, like she was telling me where the fire started. And I keep thinking about those Scrabble tiles, all those scattered letters, like the house was made out of broken language, like it was trying to say something, and couldn't. So I don't know. Maybe it was just a dream doing what dreams do, mixing fear and family and random syllables into a story that feels important. Or maybe it's one of those moments where your mind stumbles onto a name that shouldn't be there. Either way, I can't shake the feeling that I was pointed somewhere on purpose. And the strangest part is, I still want to know what's inside that house. Okay, so this happened a little over 15 years ago, back when I was about 16, and I still get that tight little shiver in my shoulders when I think about it. I grew up in this small Midwestern town where old houses are just part of the scenery. Big porches, creaky floorboards, those towering maples that make everything feel a bit older than it is. One Saturday, my parents, Mara and Glenn, dragged me along to an open house across town. They were in that let's just look phase, which everyone knows is never just looking. The house was this huge 2-story farmhouse, built sometime in the 1800s, I want to say 1860-ish, and it sat way, way back on the property. Like you drove up a long gravel lane and the house just waited for you at the end of it. The land was a few acres at least, with these mature trees and overgrown shrubs that made it feel like the place was half hidden on purpose. The yard was okay. Someone had tried, but you could tell nobody had really lived there in a while. And honestly, from the outside, it was kind of gorgeous. Not polished, not renovated, but charming in that slightly forgotten way. The kind of house where you can almost picture warm lamps in the windows, except instead, it had that tired old carpeting everywhere. Like that thick, beige, stubborn carpet that looks like it's survived 3 decades of spilled coffee and bad decisions. There were other people touring too, 4 or 5 little groups wandering around, so it wasn't empty. And yet, the second I stepped inside, something felt off. Not like a monster is going to jump out off, more like the house swallowed sound. Everything felt muffled and still, like the air wasn't moving. We started upstairs with the rest of the crowd. The rooms were big, technically, high ceilings, wide doorways. But up there, I felt weirdly cramped anyway, like my chest couldn't quite expand all the way. I remember getting dizzy too, like I'd stood up too fast and it never settled. I kept thinking, I just want to be outside again. My parents were chatting about paint colors and repairs like it was normal, and I was already mentally halfway out the front door. But we kept going, because that's what you do when you're 16 and trapped in family outings. Downstairs felt better. Still quiet, still strange, but at least I wasn't fighting that dizzy, claustrophobic feeling. I started relaxing a little, enough to think maybe I'd just gotten in my own head. Then the real estate agent, bright voice, jangly keys, the whole thing, started directing everyone to the basement. The door was right off the kitchen. And listen, you know those basements in old farmhouses? The ones that feel like they were dug out by hand and then politely ignored for the next 100 years? Yeah, that kind. The basement door opened onto steep stairs, and at the bottom was one lonely light bulb hanging from a cord like it was barely committed to the job. The walls were unfinished, the floor was dirt, and the whole place had that damp, mineral smell that sinks straight into your clothes. The steps looked like the kind where horror movies begin, where something grabs your ankles from the dark and everybody screams and nobody learns anything. We all went down together, like a little field trip into a nightmare. People poked around politely. Oh wow, look at the stonework. Needs new wiring, that kind of thing. I barely looked at anything because my whole body was focused on one thought. Get me back upstairs. I remember exactly where I was. 3rd step from the top. And then, out of nowhere, something yanked my hair. Not like a breeze, not like static. A tug. Like someone reached from behind and grabbed a small fistful right at the crown of my head and pulled, sharp and deliberate. I froze so hard I swear my brain went blank. My first thought was, okay, I caught it on something. So I whipped my head around, looked at the wall, looked at the railing, looked for a nail, a hook, anything. There was this fire extinguisher mounted nearby, but I wasn't close enough to it, not even remotely. And there was nothing else, no protruding wire, no rough wood, nothing. And the second I realized there was no logical reason for that pull, I was done, completely done. I stepped into the kitchen like my life depended on it, and basically power walked out of the house. My parents followed, confused, asking what was wrong, and I didn't even answer until we were in the car with the doors shut. Then I told them. Something pulled my hair on the basement stairs. They didn't laugh it off, which I appreciated. They got quiet, exchanged that look adults do when they don't want to freak you out, but also don't know what to say. And after that, it just became one of those stories we brought up every once in a while, usually over dinner, in that half-joking, half-serious tone. Like, remember that creepy farmhouse? Remember the hair thing? The kind of story you tell because it's the only one you've got that actually happened to you. Later on, the property got bought by this local guy who opened an Italian restaurant out front. He cleared out a bunch of the trees and the lawn to make room. Kind of sad, honestly, but the old house stayed put way back on the land. It's still there, last I heard, like it refused to budge. And then time passed. I went off to college. Life got busy. The memory faded into the general pile of weird teenage moments. Until one day, about 4 years after the open house, my mom called me with this, "You are not going to believe this," kind of voice. She'd been at an appointment with her hairstylist, and somehow the Italian restaurant came up, the one on that property. And the stylist goes, totally casual, something like, "Oh, that place? Yeah, there's supposedly an older woman spirit out there. People say she messes with folks on the basement steps, especially men. Just little stuff, like she'll tug hair or touch you when you're going up." And here's the part that got me. My mom hadn't told her anything. She hadn't mentioned my story. The stylist just offered that up on her own, like it was common gossip. When my mom repeated that to me on the phone, I swear my entire scalp prickled. That same cold, crawling feeling climbed right up my spine, like my body recognized the moment before my brain could. My mom, of course, told the stylist what happened to me back at that open house. And the stylist was apparently like, "Yep, that's exactly what people say." So, yeah, that's it. The house is still standing. The restaurant is still open. And every so often I think, maybe I should go back, just to see. But if I'm being honest with you, there's a curious part of me. And then there's the much louder part that remembers that third step from the top and wants absolutely nothing to do with it. So, this happened a few years back, late summer of 2021, I think. One of my longtime friends, Marisol, came to stay with me for a couple nights. She was visiting from a small town out in southern Minnesota, and we did what we always do when we're together. Snacks, staying up too late, and watching something we knew we'd regret. That night's choice was a horror movie, Lights Out. If you've seen it, you know the whole thing hinges on this entity that can only move in the dark, and it vanishes the second the lights hit it. The character's name in the movie is Diana, and obviously, fiction. We knew that. We were joking about it, quoting lines, laughing at ourselves for even picking it, and still, about 15 minutes after the credits, Marisol wanted to go outside and smoke, and I was like, "Sure, I'll come with you." Because the air felt cool, and it was one of those nights where the world is quiet in a way that almost feels soft. Where I lived then was this little loop of houses, almost like a cul-de-sac, except it's more of a circle. There's basically one way in and one way out. This short road that goes up a hill and connects to the main street. On one side of the hill, there's an intersection with a couple restaurants and a strip mall. On the other side, there are just a few houses, and behind those, woods. We'd see deer sometimes, and cranes, and little things rustling around that you never fully see. During the day, that hill gets plenty of sun. At night, though, it turns into this weird pocket of darkness. There's a street lamp down near the main road, but the bushes along the hill throw these heavy shadows. So when you first step out of the neighborhood and start walking up, it's like the light just stops. Your eyes adjust, but it never feels bright enough to be normal. It was close to 11 p.m., and we were walking side by side, talking about something completely unimportant. Like we were debating which horror movie is actually the scariest, when Marisol suddenly slowed down. Then she lifted her arm across my chest, like a gentle stop, and she whispered, "Do you see that?" I remember the exact way my stomach dropped, because she wasn't joking. She wasn't doing that playful, ooh, spooky thing. Her voice had that tightness people get when their brain is trying to decide if something is real. So I looked, really looked, straight ahead into that thick part of the hill where the shadows were darkest. And something was moving. At first, my brain tried to label it. Deer, crane, a person, anything, because that's what your mind does. But the more I focused, the more my thoughts just slid right off it. It was darker than the shadows around it. Not like hard to see, but like it was made of a deeper black, the way a silhouette looks when it doesn't belong in the lighting. And it wasn't walking normally. It was moving in this slow, circling pattern, almost like it was turning around itself. Like it was pacing, but not forward, just rotating. And here's the part that still makes my skin prickle when I say it out loud. It looked like only legs. 2 long legs. Too long, honestly. Not thin like a bird's, not thick like a deer's. Just wrong in a way I can't neatly describe. And there was no torso, no shoulders, no head, no arms. Nothing above where a body should be. Just legs, moving like they belonged to something that wasn't fully there. But Marisol saw it too. I could feel it in the way she went completely still beside me. Then one of us, maybe me, made a small sound. Not even a scream. Just that sharp inhale people do when they realize they're about to panic. And the thing shifted. It moved toward the side of the hill that led back into the neighborhood, toward my house, and then it was gone. Like it stepped into the darker edge and just erased itself. The whole sighting couldn't have been more than a few seconds, but it was enough. It was more than enough. I remember us both standing there, not speaking, because once you speak, it's real. And once it's real, you have to decide what to do next. Neither of us wanted to walk back toward my house, not after it went that way. So we kept going forward instead, toward the strip mall. We didn't even discuss it. Our bodies just chose the direction that felt safer. We went under the lights, stood near the storefronts, smoked like it was a chore we needed to finish, and tried to pretend we were normal people having a normal night. But we weren't. When we finally headed back, we held hands the entire way up that hill. Like kids. Like we could anchor each other to the ground just by staying connected. And here's what really messed with me afterward. A couple weeks later, I had 2 other friends over, Evan and Kira, and they ended up walking that same road at night without me. They came back pale, and before I could even ask why, one of them said, "Okay, don't freak out, but we saw something on the hill. Same place, same darkness, same impossible movement." After that, I started digging into local stories, urban legends, weird sightings, anything. I even posted about it online, hoping someone would say, "Oh yeah, that's just a heron doing something creepy," or "There's a known optical illusion there," or literally anything that would let my brain exhale. But I didn't get anything that fit. And what's wild is that I'm not someone who wants it to be paranormal. I've tried to talk myself out of it every way imaginable. I've wondered about hallucinations, fear contamination from the movie, Misperception, stress, all of it. But the details don't line up neatly, especially because it wasn't just me, and it wasn't just one night. I haven't seen it in a long time, over 2 years now, but the fear didn't leave with it. That hill still feels wrong to me. Even now, if I have to walk alone at night, and I hear the crickets stop, or the sound shifts, my whole body reacts like it's bracing for something. And sometimes I catch myself thinking, maybe I imagined it. But then I remember Marithal's voice, the way she reached her arm out to stop me. Do you see that? And I did. So yeah, I don't know what it was. I don't know what kind of thing can look like legs without a body. I just know that for a few seconds on that dark hill, something moved in a way that didn't belong to anything I've ever seen in real life. And I've been trying to make it make sense ever since. So, a little while ago, my friend Maya and I took a trip to Belgium to visit our friend Elise. Elise told us we'd be staying at her partner's family place while they were away. Nothing fancy, just somewhere with a pool, she said. You know, one of those don't worry about it situations. Except, it wasn't a house. It was a castle. I'm talking full-on 18th century storybook castle vibes. Stone towers, little turrets, and this faintly ridiculous moat that made me feel like we should have arrived by carriage instead of a rental car. The whole place sat back from the road, surrounded by wide lawns and stretches of trees that just kept going. We pulled into this long, elegant driveway, completely lined with tall trees that arched overhead like a tunnel. And as we rolled forward, the building grew bigger and bigger in the windshield until it started to feel unreal, like we'd accidentally driven onto a film set. Then we got closer to the front entrance and noticed the main door wasn't being used at all. Instead, someone had put up a sturdy gate across the entryway area, like a little fenced-off section right in front of the grand door, apparently so the dogs could be safely outside without roaming the whole property. And the dogs were losing it when we arrived. We could see them bouncing and scrambling behind the gate, all excitement and wagging tails. As the car crept closer, I started to make them out more clearly. There was a border collie stretched out low to the ground, another one springing up and down like it had springs in its legs. And then, between them, there was a third dog. And the second I really saw it, my stomach did this weird little drop. Because it wasn't just a big dog. It was wrong in the way it looked. This thing was tall and black, like truly pitch black, as if it drank the light around it. It had a sleek, short coat, but its limbs were long and oddly angular, like it was all elbows and knees. It reminded me of a lurcher or a greyhound shape, but heavier somehow, bigger through the chest, longer overall. Like it didn't quite fit the proportions my brain expects when it sees a dog. I leaned forward slightly in my seat, then twisted around toward Maya in the back and whispered, without even thinking, "Okay, what is that monster in the middle?" I didn't mean monster, literally. I was trying to be funny. But the word came out because I genuinely didn't know what else to call it. Maya didn't laugh. She just stared past me, eyes narrowed, and quietly went, "I was just about to ask you the same thing." And then, like the universe didn't want us lingering on it, we got distracted. Because the castle was right there. The grounds were enormous. The air smelled like wet stone and grass, and the whole place felt like you should speak softer just out of respect for it. We parked, dragged our bags out, started gawking at everything, and within minutes we were absorbed in the excitement of exploring. We spent the day wandering, through gardens, along little paths, near the edge of the water. And the two border collies trailed us everywhere, like friendly little tour guides. They were constantly underfoot, popping up beside us, reappearing around corners, following us like we belonged there. Hours later, at some completely random moment, it hit me like a tap on the shoulder. Wait, where's the other dog? I stopped and said to Elise as casually as I could, "Hang on, what happened to the third dog?" Elise looked genuinely puzzled. "Third dog?" She actually laughed a little, like she thought I was doing a bit. "What black dog? There are only two." And I remember this exact chill that went through me. Not dramatic, just cold realization. Because Maya and I looked at each other at the same time, both of us with that expression of, "Please tell me you're about to say you saw it too." And she did. Maya immediately goes, "No, Elise, there absolutely was a third one. It was massive, black, right between them." Elise's face shifted from amused to uneasy. She told us we must have been mistaken, or seeing things in the shadow, or maybe it was a trick of the gate and the collies moving around. But here's the thing. We described it to her the exact same way, without prompting, and our descriptions matched, too specifically to be coincidence. Elise tried to reason it out. She said maybe it belonged to someone who worked on the property, like a groundskeeper or a caretaker, and it just happened to be there when we arrived. That sounded plausible for about 30 seconds, until later on, when we did meet the caretaker on the grounds, and he didn't have a dog. And also, this is important, the dogs at the entrance had been contained behind the same gate, together, like they were all meant to be there. Elise insisted no one else's dog would have been locked in with hers. So then we're standing there with this incredibly simple problem that somehow had no simple answer. We both saw it. It was right there. And now, according to the person who lives there, it never existed. That night, because of course I did, I started searching online, trying to find literally any breed that matched what we'd seen. I went down the usual rabbit holes first: lurchers, deerhounds, mixes, working dogs. But the more I searched, the more I kept circling back to the same folklore references people always bring up when the description is large black dog. And that's when I stumbled onto stories about these regional black dog spirits, omens, guardians, wandering apparitions, different names depending on where you are. One mention that stuck in my head was a local legend tied to the area we were in. A story about a phantom black dog that shows up on old estates and near water, like it belongs to the land more than it belongs to any person. And look, I'm not saying I know what it was. I'm not pretending I can prove anything. I'm just telling you what happened, and the part that still bothers me. It wasn't like seeing something in the corner of your eye. It wasn't a shadow. It wasn't a quick glimpse. We watched it. We took it in. We commented on it. And then it was simply gone. Like it had never been there at all. So if you've ever had an experience like that, where you and someone else see the exact same impossible thing, and you're left afterward trying to jam it into the shape of a normal explanation, I get it now. Because even thinking back on it, I can still picture that gate, the two collies, and that third shape in the middle. Too tall, too black, too strange. And I still don't have a satisfying answer for it.